Thank you very much indeed. Right, as it's already done, but I'm going to go
Sorry,
through.
Chair, can I just interject, just make sure that there are no other nominations for Vice Chair? Sorry to be procedural.
Okay, does anyone else wish to volunteer to be the Vice Chair for today? No, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, before we proceed, I'm going to ask again, can everybody here in the room and online, what is coming out? Is anyone, you got all right there, James? Thank you. The agenda pack with papers is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which was sent out to members. May I invite somebody to speak? Could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anyone who is listening to the meeting so that they can identify who is speaking and ensure the use of microphones if you are in the room. Can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us today and advise that the meeting is being recorded by the council. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. Just in respect of housekeeping, there is no expected fire alarm, and should this happen, please follow Democratic Service colleagues and they will lead the way out to the car park at the rear of the building. Jamie, can I please have a list of apologies and replacements?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Dimmery. We've also received apologies from Councillor Cravis, for whom Councillor Strom is substituting. Apologies from Councillor Munt, for whom Councillor Coles is substituting. Apologies from Councillor Boyden, for whom Councillor Stanton is substituting. And apologies from Councillor Cook-Woodman. Councillor Dingwall has also advised that he will be running about 30 minutes late, but will be joining the meeting then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. The minutes from the meeting held on the 4th of December are not ready yet due to a number of problems. They will be given at the beginning of the next meeting we're having. Do I have any declarations from any members of the committee who are attending? Yes, Mike.
In relation to the early item 6, Somerset Rivers Authority, I'm chairman of the Somerset Rivers Authority.
Thank you, Mike. Steve?
Same, so I'm a board member of the SRA.
Yes, Dave?
I don't know whether this one is one or not, but I have to say an email we received recently prompted me to think about it. Parking charges. Now, we have to pay those. Is that a declaration of interest? Some of us live in areas with free car parks. Now, it did occur to me, I did raise the question only last night, so I don't know whether anyone actually knows.
I think you are covered under the same side, and I will take other as the discussions you're going to have on the council brain and gear council tax. But any of the officers like?
I would consider that exactly the same, Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. I think we've got another one over. We've got another couple of declarations here.
Sorry. Yes, Alan.
Big board.
Yes. Thank you, Hayward.
Yes, I'm a member of the Exborough and the Barrett Drainage Board.
Right. I have two questions, public questions. The first is Mr. David Orr. If you could come forward, please, David. Go on. Yes, yeah. Yes, you can. Hello. welcome to the committee meeting.
Thank you.
If you'd like to read your question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, committee members. The worsening traffic congestion problems in Bridgwater will be well known to this committee. New major developments will clearly exacerbate the present issues. Along the A372-A39 corridor in East Bridgwater alone, 2 major developments are in progress, with a third under consideration, which totals 1,600 new houses. Each scheme is supported by a transport assessment which concludes that each development in isolation would not result in a severe impact to the highway network. National planning policy requires that development proposals can be prevented or refused on highway grounds where there would be an unacceptable impact to highway safety, or where the cumulative impact on the road network would be severe. Whilst more sustainable transport solutions are aspirational, they cannot be legislated for or assumed to be a preferred option for residents, especially those commuting to surrounding locations, as Bridgwater tends to be a hub for that kind of activity. Local Transport Policy D3 and D14 emphasised the need to ensure that no unacceptable congestion or reliability issues ensue from development. Furthermore, cumulative impacts should be considered where multiple allocations affect the same transport corridor and where these impacts will interact and compound rather than operate in isolation. So my questions are, can you explain how the conclusion of no severe impact from these developments taken together remains robust once a cumulative peak hour uplift is considered? Why has no single consistent cumulative junction model been required for the A38 St John Street, Bower Lane and Dunball junctions, given that at least 3 major building schemes rely on the same constrained corridor? What sensitivity testing has been undertaken to demonstrate that no severe impact conclusion remains valid if traffic distribution, trip rates or travel behaviour differ even modestly from those assumed in the individual assessments? Have the risks of not undertaking this task been assessed, and if so, where is this documented? Have corridor-wide effects such as the real possibility of queues between A38 St John Street Junction and Bower Lane Dunball Junction been assessed, given that these effects are not captured by isolated junction models? Has the authority assured itself that corridor performance and reliability will remain acceptable beyond just the modelled peak hours? And in conclusion, have you not considered further cumulative testing, monitoring or safeguards when it is clear to all that the traffic impacts will be severe to Bridgwater and surrounding areas? I ask this committee to strongly consider that a more detailed and robust traffic assessment is necessary in the context of multiple developments relying on a shared constrained highway corridor. And I would have sent a report out, an independent assessment that was done on the current traffic and the projected traffic.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Brown. If you could turn your speaker off, thank you very much. We have a problem. That's an extremely complicated question. The officer who could answer it easily is off ill at the moment. I'm going to ask them to give you a written reply, which I'm also going to ask is given to every member of this committee. Is that all right? Thank you very much. Moving on, Scrutiny Climate and Place Outcome Tracker. You've all had it sent to you. Jamie will now take you through it.
Thank you, Chair. Members will see that it's still waiting to be updated following the last couple of meetings, so apologies for that. That's a hangover from Christmas and my own sickness, so I do apologise for that. Once it's been updated, we will circulate that in, ASAP in advance of the next meeting. you will just to remind members, we are now trying to separate out the outcome tracker, so that will be considered at the beginning of the meeting, and then the work programme will be considered as the last item of the agenda, in order that we can then capture any thoughts and ideas members have for the work programme during the meeting itself. You will see that some of the items on the outcome tracker have been on there for some time now, and not just for this committee. That's a similar challenge we've had to some of the other scrutiny committees. So one of the areas I want to work with officers and members is trying to, sort of update that, should I say. Obviously, the biggest concerns are the red blocks. What I don't want to do is effectively that to be a stick to either beat officers or the committee with unfairly or unnecessarily. So happy to take any comments, Chair, but an updated version will be circulated shortly.
Yes, David.
Thank you. A point in relation to the very first one, which is a red status one, been there since May 2023. It's indicated that this could progress now. It's to do with communication interfaces and how highways respond. It's the responses I mostly understand to problems reported on the road. It strikes me it would be good to getting that progressed now. You know, very common responses, no safety, no action required, and I just feel it's leaving more and more questions which sort of raise with me, which I'm then having to raise with officers, and sort of looking at if that system could be improved. I think would be good if we could get that underway.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think at the time that this was deferred, there was a challenge in terms of resourcing the discussion essentially and doing it properly, but I think we're in a much better position now. We've done a lot of work on communications, and I think in the annual report from Councillor Wilkins that we went through a couple of meetings ago, we started to touch on some of the improvements that we have already made. But absolutely, I think we can have a conversation about this at the committee and facilitate that when it can be timetabled appropriately. So there's no barrier now, I think, to having that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? I have one. Landscape recovery projects, which is red marked because it hasn't been looked at. Everything has fundamentally changed because the government are proposing a complete change to nutrient neutrality. And we will be discussing that at a later part of this agenda, and I don't intend to go into that now. Is there anybody else got a question? Thank you. I don't think that there's a summary necessary. I'm therefore going to move on now to the Somerset Rivers Authority and to ask Dave Mitchell to make his report. And do you want to stand down for a minute, Mike, or do you wish to just shut up?
I'm not very good at shutting up, Mr. Chairman, because there might be something to add. So perhaps I better go and sit over there.
Hi.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Okay to go ahead. Yep. Right. So I'm David Mitchell, Somerset Rivers Authority Manager, and this is Jonathan Hudson, the SRA's Communications Manager. Now, okay, so now the committee's been asked today to review and feedback on a draft executive key decision report about the council's role as host authority and accountable body for the Somerset Rivers Authority. The report itself is pretty dense. It covers a lot of information. So you will have seen the specific recommendations in the report. And rather than repeat all that detail here, I would like to summarise what the executive has been asked to agree and what you have been asked to scrutinise. And today I want to focus on helping the committee really understand a bit more about the Somerset Rivers Authority and what is achieved through that partnership. So, rather than go through that detail, just to summarise those recommendations to start the presentation. Effectively, on the 5th of March, I will be asking Somerset Council's executive to approve Somerset Council being the host authority and accountable body for legal matters for the SRA partnership, approve the lead member signing the Memorandum of Understanding on behalf of the Council, review what the SRA plans to do in 26-27 with the funding that is raised through council tax, and following full council budget setting in February, we're asking the executive to pass through that shadow precept funding to the SRA to spend on its enhanced programme. So that's very high level what the recommendations are all about and what the report covers. So before I dive into some more of the detail, I just always like to run through what the SRA is and what it isn't. The SRA is a partnership. Despite the name authority, that's a legacy thing. Initially, after 13-14 floods, there was supposed to be legislation to create rivers authorities. That has never transpired. So authority is a bit of a misnomer. We are a partnership. Now, whilst we are not, as a partnership, a risk management authority, the partnership is made up of all the organisations that are risk management authorities, and you can see those shown on the left-hand side of your screen there. So the organisations that make up the partnership have all the powers, resources and things necessary to implement things the SRA would like to achieve. The SRA really is the partners. There's not some separate SRA team with lots of resources and staff going out delivering projects. The partners deliver the projects. They bring expertise and resources. The SRA provides funding, enables collaboration, encourages problem solving together, and ensures that more can be done than otherwise would happen without the SRA. Now, we do have a bit of a unique funding mechanism in that funding is raised through council tax for the SRA. This funding was added into the base back in 2016-17, so it does not reduce any funding available for other council services. And just to emphasise my final point, the SRA was very much set up with the intention of doing extra. All our partners have a very, very busy schedule of business as usual activities. The SRA lets them do a little bit more. In 2024, the SRA published a new strategy, and all the decisions that the SRA board takes around what to fund, what to support, really is derived or shaped by that strategy. And ultimately, it is about not about what we fund, but why we fund it. We want to reduce the risks and impacts of flooding because it reduces the trauma and stress on individuals from flooding. It helps people and communities to bounce back more quickly when flooding does happen. It supports the economy of Somerset by keeping businesses open and accessible. It enables businesses to thrive and encourages new business to locate in Somerset, knowing that we are taking the risk of flooding seriously. And very importantly as well, it does protect and enhance Somerset special environments. Implementing flood risk management projects done well can have multiple benefits, including to the environment as well as reducing flood risk. So, zooming back into a little bit of the detail that is in the body of it's in the report or in the appendices to the report. As host authority and accountable body, clearly the council needs to know what the SRA plans to do with the funds that are raised on our behalf. And at the December board meeting, 12 projects were provisionally approved for next year. They're listed on the screen, and detailed descriptions were provided in the reports back. You can see how those projects are allocated across the different work streams that the SRA kind of operates under. So there's a broad spread of things. Jonathan's going to talk a lot more about the types of projects we fund later on in the presentation. And just a final point is, as of the 1st of April, everything being approved, the council would be the employer of 6 full-time equivalent posts on behalf of the SRA. So just a little bit about finances. As I mentioned earlier, the SRA is funded through council tax. It's to a cost of £14.65 per Band D household per year, so approximately 30p a week. Now, that raises us approximately, on average, over the piece, around £3 million per year or £2.9 million per year. And on average, the SRA has allocated approximately £2 million per year to projects. So you can see there's a nice balance there between what's been raised and what we're actually allocating through grants and spending. Over the piece, since 2016-17, around £32 million has been raised locally for projects and activities based on local priorities. Now, as a team, as a partnership, we are very conscious of the fact that money is raised directly from Somerset residents that goes towards us, and we then have the luxury of being able to invest that in trying to reduce the risks and impacts of flooding. In the 10 so years we've been around 260 projects and activities have been funded. Many of those projects have multiple sub-deliverables, so the actual number of things happening is much higher than that. And just one final thing to say actually on that last slide. That £14.65, it equals 0.8% of the actual total council tax charge. So it's a small increment of it. And one final point, sorry. When the SRA was set up in 2015, and then the council tax matter was addressed in 2016-17, the amount was set at 1.25% of that, the council tax in the 2016-17 year. That has never increased. It has been a flat rate ever since. So the amount being charged per house has never gone up, which as a longer term a bit of a problem because the money's worth less and less each year, but the charge has not gone up. And just moving on briefly, I just wanted to zoom back out a little bit. You saw the work streams we operate under the last slide, and now you can just see here how across all the work streams our funding has been allocated across the 10 years or so of the SRA's existence. Now you can see a big portion of that money goes towards dredging and river management. That's not surprising considering the genesis of the SRA was following the floods of 13-14 and the concerns around maintenance of the rivers. But we do fund a lot of different projects across many different work streams. And just to finish off, I was just going to, from my section anyway, I was just going to put a few statistics up on the screen. One that jumps out in the top left there, for all the river maintenance that has taken place, if you took the silt that has been removed or displaced over the years, you could cover the whole of the county cricket ground to a depth of 44 feet with that silt. And linked to that, on the other side of that, you can see 420 land management and natural flood management schemes have been funded. Now, whilst that is about slowing the flow of water, that also has the benefit of reducing the amount of silt getting into the lower reaches. So all these things do come together. They are joined up. Maybe we'd like to join things up even more in the future, but there is an overarching logic to how these things have been progressed and what we're funding. And on that note, hopefully I've not stolen too much of Jonathan's time. I'm just going to pass you to Jonathan to tell you a little bit more about the detail.
Okay, thank you, David. So as David was saying, I'm Jonathan Hudson. I'm the SRA communications person. I was going to talk you through a few slides about what to since we were last here at this committee, which I think was in November 2024. Two main things, really. One, I tried to pick out things I thought would be of interest to particular members of the committee. So I tried quite hard to pick out things from every area I thought someone was going to be representing. And in the case of some individuals, things that I thought they'd be interested in personally. A few substitutes here today. I wasn't expecting, for example, to have the actual chair of the SRA sat next to me, but there we go. And secondly, I wanted to kind of go again over some of the ground that David was covering and try and explain the area in which the kind of SRA functions. Really, it operates in the space between two conceptions of what it means to be involved with the world of flooding. On the one side, this is an indisputable fact. Everyone finds matters to do with flooding really quite complicating and quite frustrating. There are kind of endless authorities, bodies, rules, regulations, jargon, odd words like riparian, permits. Lots of literature attests the fact that people find it very difficult, frustrating, confusing to get things done, even when they really want to. On the other hand, I mean, when all's said and done, David referred to the SRA strategy, which he, myself, Councillor Stanton, worked on. And at its heart, actually, it's really quite simple. We can't control the rain. It raining these days because of climate change, kind of harder, fiercer and fiercer. I think Councillor Hobhouse, for example, you've seen in your patch some extraordinary kind of storms where the rain just absolutely hammers it down with very serious effects. But what we can do, if we can't control the rain, is actually try and manage it better when it falls, where it flows, how it flows down through catchments. We can try and hold it, store it, convey better in certain areas. And as the strategy says, in the end, what we're really aiming to do is to get the right amounts of water in the right places at the right times. Now, people can argue about exactly what the word right might mean in those contexts, but in the end, that's really kind of all there is to it. Right amounts of water, right places, right times. So if you can bear that perhaps idea in mind when we go through some of these slides, that would be jolly good, please. So first of all, biggest things we've done since we were here last is complete River Sowie, King's Edgemore drains, enhancement schemes, most sent over last year around Chidsey, as I see Councillor Dingwall recognises over there. River Sowie, artificial river, also known as the River Parrot Flood Relief Channel, built 1969 to 1972 to take excess water from the River Parrot. And since 1972, people have spoken about doing various improvements to it. Nothing's really ever happened for the best part of 50 years. Various improvements have now been made with the effect that nearly a quarter more floodwater can now flow down through that system, which has benefits for a wide part of the Somerset levels and moors. The areas, for example, in the bottom right-hand corner of that map are areas where it means that if more water is going down to the Sowie, one can do things with pumping stations and pumps and so forth in other areas and benefit those areas. So right amounts of water, right place, right time. Likewise, linked in with that, dredging happening at the moment this month, also happened last year. That's to make sure there's as much water as possible can go down the River Parrot and protect properties in that area. Also, of course, last year, the SRA stepped in to help the Environment Agency do some maintenance works that on main rivers that it didn't have the funding for at the time. That's partly so as to ensure conveyance of water, but it's also, returning to my theme, a question of during the summer, if it gets too dry, too low, because the water can't flow through the ditches, the reeds and so forth, actually it's quite bad for farming and quite bad for wildlife. So again, you want the right amount of water, right place, right time. Brew, great deal of pressure over the years for various things to be done along the Brew, but no one's ever been able to quite agree on what should be done where. The SRA, therefore, working with Somerset Council, Neil, who's sat in the corner over there, very kindly volunteered to play a big part in this work. SRA has done lots of modelling work in the lower catchment of the Brew to look at various options for things that might be done in future. And there's now a working group being set up to look at taking that further. Workstream 2, basically on the land, lots of NFM work's been done so as to hold water, stop its flow down to dangerous areas, for example, through the middle of Grenton, which has flooded several times over the last few years. Also, lots of trees planted, lots of volunteers keen to help with this, very localised flooding, try and stop small immediate problems there. Also, as I was saying, because people do find the world of flooding quite daunting, there's lots of people out there now, more than ever before, who actually want to do things, but lack the confidence to do so. So we've been giving funding to FWAG to employ people to go out and help people to understand how the world works, help them to get things done. That's really been quite an important and quite worthwhile thing. W3, urban water management, likewise, built up areas, trying to better manage water where it falls, and ideally, to do so in ways which look quite attractive. The top picture you'll see there is from Norton St Philip, a kind of sustainable drainage parkland, which looks quite sweet. The one below is Carrots Farm in North Petherton, which I guess was filmed, pictured during the construction phase. And people might say they might want to live in a house with a big kind of bomb crater style pond outside, but I don't know. The council as a whole has been quite keen to encourage kind of more attractive looking studs, and we've been doing our bit to try and help support that. Elsewhere, we funded council and Wessex Water and other bodies working on localised flood measures in places like Bridgewater and with Liscombe, and also funding studies in and around Taunton, Watchet and Frome. The map there shows you the little bits in red, areas where there's been quite a heavy concentration on doing extra gully emptying and drain jetting work to try and keep roads clearer. And there's a scheme coming up in Robbins Lane in Birtle. 5, as I said, people are more and more keen to to do things for themselves. So we've been very keen to encourage them to help do that. At the moment, we're looking at setting up flood group networks across catchments to try and connect different people, different ideas, different sources of funding, different places. We've made great progress with flood warning systems so that people in Councillor Hobhouse's area, for example, and in Councillor Strom's area, if there is going to be water coming, have time to prepare. And people have taken to that greatly, set up their own WhatsApp groups, developed all sorts of interesting schemes. Likewise, adaptation plans, Wells, Martock, Frome, Chard, Taunton, Spaxton. A section of each one of those is devoted to flooding and things people might do themselves to try and help flooding. And likewise, they're given grants for equipment. Grenton, I'll mention again, as part of this kind of suite of measures in Grenton. They've bought with SRA money their own drain inspection system, which has got a camera down the end. You can go about 165 feet with it, check where blockages are, report those, get matters dealt with much more quickly. And the parish council is keen to loan out that equipment to any other parish council who, if they have the volunteers trained, might want to use it. So I've had a cold, so I'm getting a bit throaty. A new thing over the last year, the Community Flood Action Fund, designed explicitly to help people who want to get things done off their own bat in their local areas. Grants are between £3,000 and £20,000, proved quite popular so far. We've given out about 16 new ones just come through, mostly for ditch work, which is not very glamorous, but has had an effect in various places. Places I know for a fact, because I've been out to see them, which used to flood, do not now flood because of work the SRA has funded. One in particular, we went there for our SRA Christmas outing, Stoke St Mary. We were led round by the chap in the corner, known locally as Mr Drains, Councillor Graham Watt, who showed us they've actually done an enormous amount with the £20,000 that they have. They looked really carefully, really carefully at where the problems were and where they were coming from. They got a local person in and they've attacked them with kind of great rigour and some great success. Some of the things you can see opened up there, those big culverts, hadn't been seen in that state for many years. Pardon me. And they pledged, now these works have been done, because it's that they will maintain them in future using money they're going to raise themselves. So a good case finally to round off with what David was saying, SRA about doing extra. People there got things done themselves, but there were things they couldn't do. We helped them do those things. They're now going to proceed with those things in future. So that was it, really. I would hope that you feel able to support the recommendations that have been made. We try to run ourselves well, spend our money wisely, and get things done. That's really important. There's no one else doing quite what the SRA does, and I think personally it's well worth supporting. Thank you.
Mike, is there anything you wish to add to that before I take questions from the committee?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. Right, Martin first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to you both for the presentation. A couple of clarifications and a couple of questions. So firstly, just to clarify for the record, can you tell us how the services and projects that the SRA currently carries out were funded and carried out before the advent of the SRA? How did this stuff get done before you guys came along?
Well, I suppose it brings us back to the point about the SRA funding extra things. Some of these things for a long time maybe just weren't happening just because the money isn't in the system, or wasn't in the system, hasn't been in the system for a long time. So I mean, the other thing I would say is in the past there has been times where there is more money in the public sector, so some of these things maybe have been funded through higher grants to the local authority itself in other ways. So yeah, I'm afraid that's not a great answer, other than to say it does go to the heart of the point about the SRA does enable extra things to happen that maybe can't happen
The
now.
extra is the thing. So the options would be that either local communities got involved and did stuff, ditches, whatever, might be, or the drainage got done by the wider local authority via higher grants coming down, or they just didn't get done.
These things just simply didn't happen. The SUDS inspections, for example, there's nowhere else in the country been doing the kind of SUDS inspections that the SRA has been funding.
Yeah. Okay,
Um,
that makes sense.
the water injection dredging on the Parrot was, I think, apart from one trial a few years beforehand, never been used anywhere else in the country, not been used elsewhere in the country in combination with the excavators on land that it's now been done. There's an awful lot which has only happened because of the SRA. It's quite interesting, actually, if you don't mind me expanding just for a mo. DEFRA a while ago ran a resilience innovation program. And occasionally we look through it to see what other parts of the country are up to, And they're all, for the most part, terribly proud about what they're doing. And they're doing some good things. But we look at it and think, well, we've done that. We're doing it. We started doing that ages ago. So in lots of ways, Somerset's been quite ahead of the curve in some respects.
Okay, so once again, Somerset's leading the charge. Hurrah. Yeah.
I wanted to add to the
Later.
answer, to the careful officer's answer, more of a politician's answer, the direct answer to Matt's question. Matt will remember because he was a member of the SRA board representing Mendip a few years ago. They didn't get done. The big thing that the SRA was formed to do was to dredge the River Parrot, which the Environment Agency hadn't done for 25 years. So it just hadn't been done. You'll remember all the discussions about that, some of them quite difficult. And that's more than half of where the funding goes. So sadly, you look at ditches, lots of examples that the CFAF, the Community Flood Action Fund, is now addressing, is sorting out ditches and reens and clearing gullies and culverts and under bridges that just hasn't been touched for years. Should have been done by a riparian owner, should have been done by an Environment Agency, hasn't been done.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Matt, and the second question.
Second question and two more statements. It's a quick one. Regarding the funding, you mentioned that the funding hasn't changed since the inception. Can you confirm whether that is the amount or the percentage for the record?
Can I come back in at this point, please? What they're actually saying is that the pre-seed hasn't changed. They have raised money from other sources in large quantities, which has taken the money from 2.9 million, which is the pre-seed recovery, to 26 million for their total funding for the year. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. I don't think I am. And Matt, the fundamental point is not the money, that's the basic funding. It's what they raise through the Environment Agency, Wessex Water and other sources of funding, which is benefiting Somerset.
I agree. I entirely agree, Chair, but the statement was still that the funding level hasn't changed. I just want to, the clarification is whether it's the amount or the percentage. This is just for the record.
So, apologies, Chair, I maybe haven't been clear enough. I'll come back to what you said there a second. On the specific point, so slightly complicated, a percentage was used when the amount was first established. So in 2016-17, it was 1.25% of the 16-17 council tax.
Yeah.
Every year after that, it remained a flat rate. So it's no longer a percentage of the current year's council tax. It's separated. So it is no longer 1.25% of council tax. If that is that.
Yeah, so if it was £10, then it's £10 now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And that's good. Thank you very much for that. And I promise I'll be quick, Chair. Back to my SRA days, the River Brew. And although there is a personal aspect on this, it does come back to a wider point. I was part of the argument of the £500,000 that was allocated to the dredging of the Brew, that was sent and then 2.5 years later batted back, minus the amount for modelling, etc. Since then, the work on the Brew still hasn't been done. This does come down to climate scrutiny. How can we be assured that work on the Brew will take place in the future? And well, that's the first one, really. I mean, we've been talking about the Brew for years. KSD and the SOE get the headlines and they get the funding and they get the work. The Brew always seems to be the poor relation. Although it is just above my patch, it is near my house. So I have a personal interest in this, but it's an interesting thing from an almost academic point of view as well. We've got these other two big water courses that get a lot of the action, and the Brew seems to be forgotten every time. And it was highlighted by the fact that we sent back this £500,000 minus whatever it was And as far as I'm aware, nothing else has been done. And now we are seeing again that we're talking about the brew again. When can we see spades in the ground?
To be absolutely honest on that one, it's very difficult. As I said in the presentation, the SRA is made up of the partners. There's not an extra team out there to go out and deliver projects on the ground. One of the challenges on the brew is always different opinions about what should be done, what was the best use of money, what was the benefits of doing X, Y, and Z. The point of the modelling work was to understand more about what was worth doing, and we now have a better understanding of that. I know people get frustrated when you spend money on modelling and studies, but to overcome the barriers to implementing something on the ground, so you've got to consider environmental, all of those things, you do need that work done. And it has now put us in a very good position, but I cannot dodge the main thrust of your point there, is that we do not currently have anyone in a position to commit to doing work on the brew, but we are working to try and move things forward as a partnership. So.
Yeah, again, I don't want to sound like I'm having a poke at you guys. I've worked with you guys for years, but again, next year we will see more work done on the KSD and the SOE, but the brew won't get done again. And my workshop, you guys know that I work out in Godney, and Godney catches it from the Sheppey every year, more so over the last 3 years. And we now have water running across the roads. The side of one of the roads is collapsing because of the work further downstream, no pun intended, that hasn't taken place on the brew. There's no escape for that water. And I feel personally responsible for that, as I'm part of this committee. I was previously part of the SRA, and I've been working with all you guys for years, and we've been talking about it for years. And I feel that now is a good platform for me to say that I would like to see some stuff done on the brew.
If I fully understand that, Councillor Martin. If I could add one more thing about what we learned, of what we know from the work that has been done so far. The advice we have been given is that in order to make a strong case for significant investment in the brew catchment and try and improve the flood risk situation, we need to be thinking much more broadly. Because of the density of houses, because of the infrastructure, it's hard to build a business case that will generate a large amount of central government funding to do a big project. So if we look at things much more broadly about water quality and water quantity, and bring those things together so you get the multiple benefits out of it, then there is a stronger case, for example, that you might be able to secure flood defence grant and aid. But again, it doesn't answer your immediate concern about when will work happen. All I can reassure you is the partnership does take it seriously. We're constantly enabling, encouraging, pushing our partner organisations to think about delivering projects on the brew, but they have a full suite of projects they have to deliver as part of the business as usual, so it is proving challenging. I think Mike was wanting to come back in, but just...
Mike wants to come in now. Matt, could you turn your microphone off when you finish your question? Yes?
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, Matt is dead right. The brew is a real worry and a concern, and it's hung about for far too long, and it needs to get done. One of the reasons I've opted to subject myself to the ex-brew board meetings as well as the Parrot ones is so that I can really get to understand exactly what the obstacles are. The modelling's done, that's been funded, so I think we're now in a position to specify what needs to be done. But like all flooding, there's a knock-on effect. You know, if you improve the flow in one place, then you can cause a flood in another place, either upstream or downstream. But David mentioned that all we do as an SRA is allocate funds. We aren't a delivery body, so the delivery body that was due to use that 500,000 and gave some of it back because it didn't do the work, couldn't do the work, was the ex-brew IDB, Internal Drainage Board. I still don't fully understand exactly why they didn't do it and gave half the money back. But I'm determined to get to the bottom of that and get us doing stuff on the brew. You know, the Parrots had lots of attention because the SRA grew out of the Parrot, floods on the Parrot. It was floods on the Parrot in 2014 that were the big problem. We've sorted out the SOE and King Accessional Drain. We finished that work just earlier this year, last year, end of last year. So I'm determined that we give our attention more to the Brew and to the rivers that flow into it, the Sheppey and so on. And there's been serious flooding up in Croscombe. There's been flooding in Shepton Mallet. One of the reasons we rotate our board meetings and we have 4 a year, and we move them. They're in Shepton Mallet, and then Yeovil, and then Taunton, and then Bridgewater. And at Shepton Mallet, we always get people from Godney asking questions, quite rightly. And we really need to get down to getting something done. But the practical obstacle is that I'm not a hydrologist, but over the last 7 years, I've learned enough to know that you can't just drain that bit, clear that bit, because it's all connected up. And if you increase the flow up there, then you flood somebody lower down. So it's complicated, but we really must and are determined to get it done.
Do you want to come back again, David?
I was just wanting to come back, Chair, on the point you made about some of the figures in my presentation. I need to just clarify a couple of things on that. So is this a good time to do that?
No problem. It shows where you're spending them, not where you're raising them.
Well, in relation to your point, it's the 32, can't change that. Don't know why much. So the 32 million figure I provided, that is the total amount raised through the precept over the 11 years of the SRA. So rather than, it's not a 1 year total, and that 32 million is explicitly raised from council tax from residents, and the £26.5 million figure in centre there, that is how much has been claimed of that 32 million from the SRA. The difference between the 32 and the 26.5 is the projects that are still underway and have not drawn down their grant funding. So I just apologize that I wasn't clear enough in my presentation about that.
Thank you for correcting me. Have you got another question, Matt, that you sorted?
That's all.
Right.
Thank you, three. Thank you very much.
Richard.
Oh, thank you for bringing me in. Reform UK, in fact, Somerset's Reform UK has made it absolutely clear that they have that they don't understand flooding in Somerset, or don't think that it exists, I believe. And I will quote the leader of Reform UK in Somerset. We propose withdrawing our financial support from the Rivers Authority. I just want to understand what impact removing support from the Rivers Authority would have on the lives of the people of Somerset.
You don't have to come back on that if you don't want to, it being a political question, and you're an apolitical organisation. But do if you are happy to do so.
On a purely in a factual on a factual matter, the result would be 3 million, a minimum of £3 million per year less within Somerset to invest in flood risk management. And you saw the numbers of projects and things that have been delivered. So without that £3 million, those extra activities would not be able to take place. That would be the straightforward answer.
Let's take the example of Moorland, Northmoor Green, which is the area that flooded really badly. 140 something houses flooded in 2014. That's what gave rise to the SRA. Happens to be the village my grandmother grew up in, so I feel very connected to it. I keep saying to the residents there, as I do to residents everywhere, you will flood again. These flood events happen, as far as I can understand the cycle, and I've looked at it from 1600 onwards, it's about every 70 years, plus or minus 20. It's got worse because of climate change, because we've got 20 or 30% more rainfall. So all these areas will flood again. The question is, how bad will it be and how good are the defences? And if you take Moorland Northmoor Green, which is, for those who are not familiar, just above Bridgewater on the River Parrett, if we stop doing this water injection dredging that we do every year, we're doing it now, right now, we do it in January, or we fund it to be done in January. It's actually done by the Parrett Drainage Board and a subcontractor for them, a Dutch subcontractor. If we stop doing that, then I would have to say to the residents of Moorland, it's probably every 50 years or 30 years. And when the flood happens, it will be as bad as 2014. So that, you know, that's the short, vivid answer.
Thank you, Mike. Dave Mansell.
Okay, thank you. I will start by saying well done on all you're doing. I support the recommendations of the report and think this is good funding and looks well spent. So sort of looking through the report, I'm impressed with the spread of projects that you have. I think there's the focus has increased a bit more in some areas like natural flood management, working with communities, which I'm pleased to see. I also pleased to see that you are doing monitoring, modelling, and looking to understand. For me, I always think that's important. So I'm pleased to see that you're doing that work as part of your overall programme, and it shouldn't be neglected, because it is the thing that helps us understand and ensure, you know, the best things are being done. The area I represent, and the clues in the name, Upper Tone, is largely up in the hills, and for us the problems are surface water, largely. Obviously we do have rivers and so on running through, but many of the flooding issues we have are surface water, and a lot of this. And it just feels like the incidents, and they're often quite small, but we're just getting more and more of them. I've just always got a number raised, and obviously this time of year is a particular time of them, and there's new ones and others that have just been there a long time and getting worse and causing more local concern. And what is understood to, and what appears to be some of the causes, well, it can be runoff from the fields. Blocked drainage is often thought to be part of the problem, and indeed you can often see that it is. So culverts, no maintenance for as long as anybody can remember, completely blocked up. Ditches similar, and sort of gullies also blocked, and pipes as well, sort of pipes sometimes under the highway, somewhere elsewhere, which just don't seem big enough for the flow that there is these days. So that is sort of part of the sense that I get as a largely layperson, but increasingly gets, you know, these issues raised, and we have had some bad flooding incidents, not least in Milverton, as you'll be aware. Okay, so, but as I said, I think you are doing good work. What I'd like to suggest is, for the problems in my area, I think the community aspect and support for that could help a lot. Perhaps also reflecting the question Matt answered, but in a different context. I do also get the sense, though, that a fair amount of the problem has come from highways funding being reduced, you know, consistently over a long period. And they do try to help, and sometimes highways is sort of part of the problem, and the officers are very helpful, I'd say, and knowledgeable. But their maintenance budgets have been cut back, and in the past where they used to be able to help, they're less able to do so. So there is an issue there with highways. Nevertheless, I will say I'm impressed with what the highways people try to do, and especially, you know, when you realise the budget limitations. The community aspect could help. So, you know, I'm keen on that, and I think you're getting more and more projects. I think the suggestion I would have is spread the good practice. Let people know more about this, because I think the level of understanding is still relatively low, even amongst areas with these problems. And I think you've got lots of good stories to tell and increasing numbers. So do try and spread them out. Let people know, especially in the parish councils, but of course wider as well. And final point, there's clearly a whole number of people involved with water courses and likes, and when flooding problems arise, and we're talking about, you know, the riparian responsibilities, which again is really confusing for people and not often understood. Getting that over, I feel, is important as well, and letting people know the spread of, you know, people who need to be helping to get these problems sorted. So yeah, that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Do you want to say?
Yeah, just to say thank you for that feedback, Councillor Mansell. On your point about spreading the word, I absolutely agree that we could be doing more of that. As for example, the Community Flood Action Fund projects, we do put the information about the successful schemes on our website to try and help people have inspiration for applications they could put in themselves, but we can do more to maybe promote that. When LCNs were first coming around, we did make an effort to go around some of those and present and talk more about the SRA. So it's probably a good reminder to me to actually get away from my desk more and get out and get the word out. We do have our community engagement officers who are absolutely out all over the county spreading the word, but I think you make an absolutely very valid point. We talk about, I think you touched on at the end there, about riparian responsibilities and confusion, and Jonathan mentioned about the general confusion around the water sector and who does what. We do have trickling away in the background a project to develop some kind of web resource. At one point we were calling it a one-stop shop, the idea of it being at somewhere that people can at least go to, and rather than having to click through multiple different organisations' websites to find the right information, somewhere they can go one place and quite quickly hopefully get to where they need to go to get help or information, amongst other things. So that is something we are trying to do a bit of work on. We recognise that issue of riparian responsibilities. It's confusing, but there is potentially big wins there if you can really get people to come together and take on more responsibility around some of those things. Hence why part of the Community Flood Action Fund is, you could challenge and say, why are you funding maintenance that others should be doing? It's from our perspective, it's relatively small investment. And if we can help a community get, for example, a ditch network up to standard so that it reduces the risk of impact of flooding in their area, and then they commit as a community to come together and maintain that, we feel that's a really big win, and it can be a real enabling factor. So yeah, thank you for your feedback.
Yes, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, we ought to mention, David, the community engagement officers. We employ 2 community engagement officers who do a tremendous job. You'll know, Henry, because they've been and helped with getting the gauges in to warn people of floods on the CAM. They've been up with Will Wren up to your area. Dave, I've been with them to Monk Silver recently. And they are probably the best tool we've got for educating communities and helping communities understand what they need to do. And these things really are much better dealt with at a local level, at a parish level. It's people in parishes who know where the water comes from, where it goes, where the block culverts are, where the clogged up ditches are. And I remember vividly Will showing me the hillside down which the water had run and caused a pretty catastrophic flood of a few houses. We had it in my own village, South Petherton, just under a year ago. 26 houses flooded in a 1.5 hour deluge, just because farmers drained fields and made the water flow faster down to a mill stream which has been culverted over the last 150 years and is too small. You mentioned culverts being too small, so it's a fundamental problem, and it's getting worse as we get more rainfall.
Thank you. Simon Cole.
Thank you, Chair. There's just a couple of observations. The first one is one of the problems we have is the funding is being limited and restricted year on year. This is no longer in the base budget, and it needs to get back into the base budget to maintain the level, because we are just being eaten away. You compound that with the Environment Agency withdrawing some support, and you have a double whammy, and we are less effective than we should be and would wish to be. And the community agents, officers are really, really good at what they're doing, but they are restricted. We've come back from 1.2 million to, I'm not sure what the figure is, David will tell me, but it's, it is a restricting effect on us. And we should be back up to the 1.25%. We were promised by the then Prime Minister after the savage floods in 14, that we would have this money and there would be legislation. That has not happened. And we are starting to fall behind, not through anything not through anything we're doing, but we are running. There are too many projects to do. There's too much work to do for the amount of money we have. And if we don't get the leverage all the money in that we can, which I know David and Jonathan are doing and Mike are doing every day, it is getting harder year on year. So we need to get some government movement to get that back into the base budget so that we can continue to protect all of Somerset. There is no quick answer. Mike's quite right. Some of the culverts are too small. They were built 150 years ago. It's a very different weather patterns 150 years ago. We need to do a lot of this work, and it would be helpful if the Environment Agency didn't keep chopping us off at the knees every year with a further cut. And also if we could maintain the funding properly. So I'd like to thank everybody for what they do, and I wish we could do more. And I would personally like to see the precept put back up to where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. There's nothing to answer. We'll take it. You'll say thank you to it. Right, James, you had your light on, Deval. Do you still wish to speak?
Yes, it was really on the point on the brew, just to say it is on our radar. We've posted modelling options. 2 members on the SRA meeting, I think it was last month. It is something that we're trying to have a look at internally, see how we can integrate really within the service. We have got obviously constraints at the moment where we're still trying to recruit members of the flood and coastal team. But since last year, where we've integrated the water management services with the climate team, as David said, there's some real opportunities here to look broader and more strategic, not just internally, but also with partners across the risk management authorities to see how we can bring in, outcomes around nature, recovery. So, we have the local nature recovery strategy going to executive in March, and that could be a potential vehicle which could help, move this forward, identify funding opportunities. It's still just a point of discovery, a point of understanding those options, which are available and which ones would be the best ones to take forward against the actual fees, which are being modelled against them. It's a complex area as well, with land management issues, as well as obviously identifying the funding. So members of the SRA, as Mike has mentioned, are committed to trying to see how we can move this one forward. It feels slow, but it's a complex area to move forward, but it is very much on work streams and radars. I just wanted to sort of reassure members there. I also just wanted to sort of come in as well and sort of thank David and the team of the SRA. They're a small team, but actually they are coordinating and managing a lot with not just the council, but the other members around the table. Thanking Mike Stanton, actually, with leadership wise, he goes the extra mile. He wouldn't, I don't want to big him up too much as he's in the room there, but actually I do need to recognise actually what he is doing there with the SRA, and especially he's mentioned there around Bell and Paul, the engagement officers. They're not necessarily seen as part of the SRA or the wider partnership because they are fully integrated within the community, and they're doing so much for us, as a council, but also as a part of the SRA partnership. So I really appreciate their work and the ongoing efforts that they're doing to sort of bring the intelligence from the ground, especially in flood events, as well as supporting us to identify some of the key priorities moving forward. So I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you, James. If the team in front of me get any more pats on the back. Right, Alan Bradford, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My brother had been the chairman of the Power Drainage Board. I'm kept up to date with quite a bit happens. And first of all, I want to thank everybody who dragged heavily on the work that's been done over the last few years. Regarding my Patrick Moreland Northmore, lessons were learnt there at 2014, and I hope some of them lessons are carried forward. What my brother doesn't know about the drainage system in Somerset ain't really worth knowing, to be honest. He's one heck of a mind of information. And it's like a lot of these people that get older, when they're gone, all these things will be forgotten. Because younger people coming on don't know quite the same flows, the same outlets and everything else that goes on. I recognise the fact there's more housing going on, farming's changing dramatically. I was at a meeting on Tuesday actually at Sedgemoor, and I was amazed that no one knew that Currymore flooded for probably 3 months of the year. Absolutely amazed. You've got local people all the way around, and I'm the only person in that room that knew North Curry flooded. Now that takes the pressure off of Taunton, obviously, because the Tone and the Parrot, where that flows out into, is always an issue at Cuts Drove, New Road, and right the way across. But I used to say years ago, when that flooded, that fertilised the moor, because all the fertilisers and everything else coming down from the uplands, back at Taunton and all the way down through the red soil, which are all moaning about now and again, that used to keep the moor fertilised and fertile. Because you never had to put fertiliser on the moor to make grass grow, it grew itself. And thank God we got the moors after the summer we just had. But there again, it's a bad thing if the EA starts withdrawing some of its finances and regarding the main rivers, because I brought this up at the last county council. They all had a snigger, they all had a laugh, but they didn't care. They probably got it. That water is very much like traffic. The minute you stop it flowing, you're going to have problems. If these rivers aren't maintained and dredged, then the SRA and the Internal Drainage Board can do what they like. The water will not get out, and that is the important part of all of it. It's an awful lot to learn regarding water, and when you start playing about with it, I'm not bringing the EA in on this, you're playing with fire. You cannot afford to cut these things down when certain things are happening everywhere else. With the development, it's going to increase. There's no ifs, no buts. Development won't get less. And the farming practices, they won't be changing. So really, some heads got to be got together and sort these things out. But the minute you start cutting funding on anything, that includes my farm, I don't know what's going to happen. You go backwards. And it's not good when it's been taken to a certain level by all these good people representing certain things in the room today. That's all I could speak on it for hours. I used to live on the edge of Northmoor, and I know exactly what, if you flooded years, we used to get out in the boat, go out shooting at night, 3 or 4 foot of water. That was an annual event at Northmoor, Moorlands, an annual event. It's been cut down. Now we don't get nothing near the water through. Lessons were learned in 2014. Oh, you remember going through Moorland on one of these amphibious army things, and there's such a water in front of me was up here. And how it changed. It has changed from then to now. But there's always a fear it could happen again. So you always got to be on your guard. You start withdrawing the funding and there will be trouble. Sorry to harp on, but if I didn't do that, my brother would be very disappointed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alan. Right, Mike, you want to come back?
I just want to briefly pay tribute to Tony, Alan's brother, who's vice chair of the SRA and has been since its inception. In fact, he's the only person who's been a member of that board right from the start in 2015. He's also chairman of the Parrot Drainage Board, as Alan said, and he does a tremendous job. But one thing, I'm just going to be a bit harsh and realistic now. He opposes doing lots of natural flood management upstream, building leaky dams and retention ponds, which you were arguing for, Dave. So, we've got a constant argument going on about that. The problem being that you probably need to build a couple of thousand. We're building, I can't remember the figure David put up, 600 or something. So, if you're going to slow the flow, which you need to do, Alan's right, you've got to get it out. Once it's got downstream, you've got to get it out to the Bristol Channel. But if you can hold a lot of it back in the upper catchments, then you can reduce the risk to the villages lower down. So it is really complicated, and not everybody has the same opinion about what the right solutions are.
I did make that statement 3 years ago, actually, to get the water before it gets down. Yeah. Irrigation pond.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Mike. Haywood Burt. No problem. Thank you. Rob Reed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, which is excellent, looking from the top down. But I'm going to take it the other way and looking from the bottom up. Parish councils are the feet on the ground, basically. They know where the local problems are. They're quite important. When they do spot overgrown vegetation clogging up streams and so on, where is their first point of call? That's the first question. And secondly, you did mention up there the River Alum, we're looking at how they flow. In 2008, after the hamlet of Stony Stratton got virtually flooded away, Mendip District Council did a very comprehensive flood report on that. And I wonder just whether you've got that report, whether you've taken it forward, because none of the recommendations that they had presented at that time have been done. So I'm just wondering, has that been followed through at all?
Sorry, Councillor, could you just say the name of the report again, please, the Mendip one?
I'm not sure the name of the report offhand. It was 2008 was the big flood, so it would have been done 2008, 2009. I have got a copy at home.
I think it's the River Alum, which goes through Alhampton. Yeah, and yes, sorry, go.
On the first point you raised about if you see overgrown, congested river watercourses, etc., where's your first point of call? It's never a straightforward answer, that one. Oftentimes, it is the landowner, the riparian owner, as we refer to, it will be their responsibility to address that. So parish councils can be well placed to kind of maybe raise that with the landowners. It all depends upon the status of that river or watercourse as well. So you may have heard the term main river. The Environment Agency has an overall kind of strategic responsibility for main rivers. So if you see a river and there's a significant blockage in it, and it's a main river, which is you need to find out first, you can contact the Environment Agency to raise your concern. Now the Environment Agency, they might take a look at what you have raised and conclude that's not actually causing a significant flood risk. They don't have any duty to go in and remove that blockage. What they do have is powers. If they view that as being causing a significant flood risk, they may well want to take action, so could go in and do something. And it's a similar situation with ordinary water courses, where the Somerset Council as the lead local flood authority has a strategic overview responsibility for that. Again, they would not have a duty to go in and maintain any of that, but the manager's right behind here might correct me, but if they viewed there a significant flood risk, they could take action and then potentially even recharge the landowner for taking that action. So brings me back to the point I made about the website we're looking to establish for a one-stop shop, so that someone like yourself, if you want to know exactly where to go, it should be easier to find out that information. So it's complicated would be the answer to that. You moved on to a second point was in terms of the Mendip District Council study, it's not one that I'm necessarily aware of. Obviously, the date of that incident predates the SRA. We did fund various studies through Mendip District Council, and we do have copies of those reports, and we do work with our partners who try to take forward some of those recommendations. I can share that report with you if you would like to see it. I can't remember exactly how much of the area it covers. And I've forgotten the second point. Jonathan, did you pick that one up?
I was going to say, I don't know whether the 2008 report you referred to has been called into play or not, but I can certainly find out for you. I mean, the River Alum subcatchment project is looking very thoroughly at the River Alum. So if that's not been looked at so far, then, and if you've got a copy, then we'd certainly be interested in seeing it. Because, we're keen to run that as a kind of pilot for what can be done on a kind of small subcatchment scale. As regards riparian responsibilities, it is, as everyone said, just to reinforce David's point, fiendishly complicated. That's part of the problem. The first port of call would be the landowner, but one of the problems with the state of the law is that you can say to somebody, you aren't maintaining this properly, but then there's nothing set down to say what standards should be maintained to. So I could get someone say, this isn't maintained properly, maintain it, and they'll say, okay, well, tell me how, to what level. And there's no answer set down in law or anywhere else. So someone could perhaps go in and snip a few things and say, well, I've maintained it. Is that enough for you? And you go, well, no. And, it's very tricky. But the first landowner will be the first port of call, generally speaking. But one reason we're keen to develop the flood catchment, flood group networks over the catchments is to kind of build up a kind of pool of knowledge about these things so that people can see how things connect and learn lessons from each other and see for themselves what's acceptable and what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's a slow process, but it's doable and it does have effects. I mean, Stoke St Mary, I've showed the last slide of. Kind of examples quite strong. I mean, Mr. Drains, let's call him that still, said he tried to involve one farm, he wasn't very keen. He said, people involved don't do anything. Look at that, bit of the road, for example, nothing's happened there. But actually, highways came out in about a day and a half flat, fixed it, at which point his view changed and he became very cooperative and has done lots of things off his own bat. So sometimes just little things, little examples can make a big difference.
Thank you. You have been very politically correct. I'm about to blow your cover completely. To answer your question, Rob, the Environment Agency are responsible for enforcing the landowner failing to clear his riverbank. The standard it should be cleared to is sufficient that there is no obstruction of the flow of that river. Now, in my division in West Camel, they have got money off of the SRA, and they have cleared all the banks right the way through West Camel, where the stream runs by the gardens, and the flow beyond it until they reached Bridgehampton, which is not in their parish. And I'm sorry to blow your cover, gentlemen, but there you go. Right, Steve Ashton.
Yeah, bit quieter. I went to an NFU talk on riparian responsibilities. It was given by the EA and a representative of Somerset Council. And what was apparent is that the idea, it's quite complex on responsibility near boundaries. And they went through a lot of worked examples. And a number, there was about 50 or so NFU members there, and I would say most of them didn't know where their responsibilities started or ended. So I think it's worthwhile pushing forward with an education, not only repeating that to lower down the food chain, possibly to parish councils, so they can report on responsibilities, but they went through exactly, if there's a hedge and followed by a ditch, that your responsibility is, even if it's far side of your hedge, you're responsible for that ditch there. So it's something that the SRA could look into in educating parish councils to report back and making the case more firmly. I know you said it's a grey area on how much work you do, but the actual law on responsibilities and boundaries is quite clear, and therefore clarifying that to landowners and via parish councils could be a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ashton. On that point about educating parish councils and others, Paul Elliston, our community engagement officer, he does actually run a riparian workshop, and which he does go out and does exactly that. He's got this type of scenarios you're describing, and he can run through those to help people understand those, and we can offer those to parish councils. Oftentimes, when we're provided community flood action fund grants, because they're undertaking what would essentially be riparian works, we do encourage them to invite Paul along to give his riparian workshop to the council and others to raise that awareness after the fact as well. We will continue to do that.
Thank you. That is the last question. I'm just going to make 2 points myself. The first is that everyone in this room should remember that every individual is responsible for their own house and their own workshops and everything else from flooding. And there is a very good online lady who's been flooded 4 times called Flood Mary. If you go online to her, she will explain to you how you actually deal with your house being flooded. Her house is now, the water can run through, it leaves, there's nothing to be done up apart from brushing the mud out. The second thing, I want to thank the River Authority for paying for the VAT for the flood alert system, because my original grant I got to set it up was not enough to cover when they had the VAT. And I want to remind people that this committee has had a presentation of the flood alert system, which gives you, and it has gave a number of people very good warning in December where the level of the River Cam came up to quite close to the bank, so that they knew something was happening. That flood alert system was put in by the River Authority and the EA jointly, but paid for. The system behind it was paid for by a grant. The last thing I wish to actually say is that I'll be coming to you for another grant for another one of my parishes in Podimore, who've got to make Park Brook deeper. Thank you very much indeed, and I remind the committee that the recommendations are provisionally approve the proposed 26-27 SRA enhanced programme and budget, approve the SRA workstream leads and developing a proposal for making use of the unallocated funds for the SRA board to consider at its meeting on the 6th of March 2026. Can I have a vote, please, on the closing? Thank you, Simon. Seconding? Yeah, go on, David. Dave Mansell, can I please have a vote on those recommendations? That's all. Everybody's for it. Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Your report was extremely good, and it is always a pleasure to work with you. Go on, David.
Sorry, Chair. I don't think those recommendations were the ones I was expecting.
They're the ones I have in front of me on the report.
Well, so the report I put in.
I think Jay went through the reasons for proposals. The proposal A is all part of the same paper. I think we voted on the right part of the paper, but it's Somerset Council continuing its role to host authority and accountable body. Is that what you're looking at, David?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 12 of
page 12. Yeah, points A, B, C, D, and E.
A to E.
So I think we were all looking at the right part of the paper. I think the lines you read out were for the reasons for the proposal. So.
It's the section above the
Chair, for clarity, I was proposing all A to E.
Okay. The question I have to ask is why they're not at the end under recommendations, at the end of the paper where the two recommendations are on this paper. Go right to the end.
as I'm getting towards the end, I think the very end is there's 2 or 3 appendices, and those appendices are reports that went to the SRA board itself as background information. So I think that's where those recommendations have that you're referring to, Chair. So just back to the page 12, the scrutiny recommendation is around, I don't know the wording, reviewing and commenting and feedback on the executive report that is going to, the key decision report that's going to the executive. And then the recommendations that the executive will be considering are also listed. Does that clarify matters?
Thank you for thing. Right, we have executive recommendations, which fooled me completely. I'm not going to read out all 5. Can I have a proposal? Thank you, Simon, and a seconder. Thank you, Andy. Please, can you vote on the executive recommendations? That's unanimous as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got to go through the annual report of the climate and place scrutiny for the next full council meeting. It is all laid out in the paper. Has anybody got any questions about that before it is taken to full council? Yes, David.
I quickly looking at when my note read through. I think there's been a little bit of confusion on the Levi fund, and maybe I'm the one who's confused. But page 7, E, it's got about. It says at the moment, recognising high member interest, the committee supported creating a task and finish group to track delivery and I have raised this before. I don't think that's what actually happened at the meeting, but there was some confusion. We were told about an officer task and finish group, and that was actually what was being referred to, was my understanding. So if on that understanding, I would suggest that line should just be taken out. It was never a committee task and finish group. It was an officer one we were told about, but it can just be taken out. And if it then said recognising high member interest, ask that cross pavement charging solutions be developed, etc. And that was something that we did recommend and ask for. So I think there's an easy solution.
Mike.
Yeah, just response to that, Chair. I think that's a correct understanding, Councillor Mansell. So that seems a sensible amendment.
Anybody else? I just wish to comment on the M5. Ask to look at the closures and stuff, which hasn't happened yet. Are we still planning to bring it back to this committee if we can get the police and others to attend? Thank you, Mike.
Yes, we have been continuing communication, and I think the intention is to try and get the Police and Crime Commissioner to attend, which has been offered by the police. So it's just still in the process of tying down the date. We were discussing the March committee. I don't think it's quite tied down yet, but that seems to be the one which we're aiming at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? Right, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please, that this goes forward to full council? Yes, Dave. Sorry, Aisha, go on. You want to come in?
Yes, I did just want to say that it isn't decided which full council meeting this report is going to go to, because the last time an annual report went to the full council was just 6 odd months ago. So I'm waiting for all the meetings for this financial year to wrap up, and then with all the amendments and stuff, and then take it further. So I'm not sure if it requires a proposal at this moment, but I can bring it back if needed.
Thank you, Aisha. Yes, Andy.
With that in mind, if the most recent report went 6 months ago and we're waiting 6 months to bring another report in, the report would be 6 months out of date at that point. Would there be a review, and would it have to come back for us to read again? In which case is it worth voting on?
I would agree with you, and I would also point out this committee will not be in existence in 6 months. So we need just please to have it before the end of the financial year. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Rob. With the one amendment that Mike's already agreed to, are we all happy with this report? Could you hold your hands up if you are? Thank you very much. You know. Right, before we start the phosphate policy and ask David to talk to us, who's not here at the moment, I'm going to have a 10-minute break to allow people to get a cup of tea or go to the loo. Thank you. Right, we're moving on. As this committee knows, we're about to talk about the phosphate policy, which is one of my favourite subjects. We have a question. David, can you please sit at the front if you're going to ask your question? We have a question from Mr. David Orr, which we're going to start off this subject with. David, it's all yours. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The current nutrient neutrality policy, following Natural England's guidance to the letter, has not only failed to direct specific funding towards restoring nature on our world-class levels and moors, but has damaged the economy and communities across Somerset, with 12,000 vitally needed homes unbuilt, including 3,600 social and affordable homes. This flawed nutrient neutrality policy has also denied this council much needed developer funding and income towards avoiding bankruptcy. Funding towards infrastructure, social and affordable housing, schools and doctors has been swallowed up by the phosphate mitigation calculator. It is the ultimate computer says no policy by spreadsheet deity never to be questioned. Water bills are now 50% higher than 3 years ago, resulting in Wessex Water making huge investments to reduce phosphate discharges to the lowest technically achievable level. This is around about 1/20th of what we used to get out of sewage works 5 to 10 years ago. We have seen significant river quality improvements in the human levied and diked Tone and Parrot rivers, which flow past, not through, the levels and moors. Our human engineered rivers are unique. They do not behave in an estuarial way as a typical river. Additionally, Wessex Water has undertaken to offer that no dividends will be paid for 5 years. Yet the spreadsheet deity won't recognise the additional water bills from Somerset citizens or the consequent huge investments by Wessex Water, now showing significant and measured river quality improvements. Dr. Clegg, for the first time in many years, has recorded a good quality reading on the River Parrot at Langport. Back in 2021, the key phosphate factor in the spreadsheet for new homes was set at 120%, where 20% was a precautionary factor. 5 years later, in 2026, despite all the improvements, that factor remains at 120%. That is both irrational and unjustified. Now a competing mitigation system is being set up by Natural England under the Planning and Infrastructure Act, finally recognising this council's long-standing view that a nature recovery fund dedicated to recovering nature, ring-fenced to improving the conditions of the levels and moors, is the best way forward. This council is the competent authority in this matter, with Natural England's current guidance being advisory rather than statutory. The new environmental delivery plans are statutory instruments under the new Planning and Infrastructure Act and will be approved by the Secretary of State. All this information only came out just before Christmas. Whilst an EDP cannot be disregarded by the local planning authority, Somerset, as the local planning authority, must be satisfied the environmental obligations are met by it. Unfortunately, clarifying secondary legislation and guidance on how this operates is still under development. So my 3 questions, Chair, are: can Somerset continue to wait until the current flawed nutrient neutrality, damaging status quo policy is replaced by an unknown system with unknown charges, probably not until about April 2027? Given the nature recovery focus, is it now time to move nutrient neutrality out of planning and into an environmental group? Should this council be embedded with the work led by Natural England towards the new system to ensure it is fit for purpose with sensibly set charges? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Orr. Chris Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Orr, for your questions. So in response, I would say that whilst we, the local planning authority, can consider the advice of Natural England, their advice holds significant weight as they are a statutory consultee. And to that end, should the local planning authority deviate from their advice, Natural England's that is, we must be able to robustly demonstrate why and be able to defend any deviation whilst determining applications. There is a risk that that approach may lead to legal challenge and further delays. In response to question 2, so nutrient neutrality is a fundamental aspect of the local planning authority determining applications, and at this stage we are not proposing to make any changes as to where those expertise sit within our organisational structure. And then question 3. So I think this is a really important one, and that's not to diminish the value of the other questions, but I think it's a really important one. So I'm going to repeat it, if I may. So should the council be embedded with the work led by Natural England towards the new system being environmental delivery plans, to ensure it's fit for purpose with sensibly set charges? So The council doesn't yet have a position on EDPs. We are exploring that with Natural England. And it's really important that we do engage with them over that process. And that could enable us to deliver more promptly some of the not only nutrient neutrality mitigations that are required, but it goes further than that in talks of reinstatement. So at the moment, nutrient neutrality policy requires developers to mitigate the nutrient created by their development. So it effectively holds the council and the levels and moors in a standstill position. That's the proposed impact or proposed requirement of mitigation. The EDP process, the environmental delivery plans that are being consulted on by Natural England, go further. They don't just deal with mitigation, but they start to look at reinstatement of the levels and moors. And therefore, for Somerset, that has the potential to be a much broader benefit. And therefore, we need to consider that. But that is one of the reasons, Chair and Committee, that we haven't yet brought back a proposed response to nutrient mitigation policy, because this change and consultation occurred in December, and we as a council need to consider whether that is a more appropriate route or not. It is different to the challenge that we have been facing around Headroom and Wessex Water, and whether we can apply that as mitigation. So we feel that it's a really important change. We need to consider it properly, and we'll continue to do so, bringing a report as soon as it is ready. So I'll probably stop there in terms of the public questions, if that's all right, and then the committee can debate.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to speak first, if you don't mind, Simon. Right. For those of you who haven't picked up what I've been trying to talk about now for 5 years, I'm just going to go through the problems that this council has due to the policy that was brought in March 21. The situation is that our housing has been held up by having to go through and find out what the required mitigation is for each house. We have different levels of money being put in by the developers. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand Taunton is about £5,000 a house now because of the clean-up in the sewage farms in Taunton, whereas in my division, we are still talking between £25,000 and £34,000 a house, because my sewage farms are too small and haven't been cleaned up. Therefore, the pollution going into Mike's Rivers is worse off of the small communities in the rural areas. This leads to a real problem with the legal 106 agreements for every single development in Somerset. The money was going to the farmers. It was unenforced. I have one area that I know of, no names, no pack drill, where 30 acres was fallowed to mitigate 200 houses, and the farmer has been spreading manure all over the fallowed fields, which doesn't sort out the mitigation. The new proposals are a serious advance. Firstly, we're getting improvements to the levels and moors. Now, up until this point in time, we've had natural landscapes in Mendip and Polden Hills, and down in Chard with Devon. And that's been managed by management, which has been supervised by this council. And that has improved the wildlife and the landscapes in those areas. The application we put in some time ago as the county council for the Somerset levels and moors to have the same management system in place was turned down. James Duval, who I'm going to ask to talk on EDPs in a minute, has applied through the back areas to see whether we could get a management scheme in sometime a year ago to cover the levels and moors. The proposed scheme transfers the money to Natural England to manage the biodiversity on the levels and moors. I personally have one major problem. Natural England have absolutely no data. They have spent 5 years looking at the levels of moors and are not actually finding out what is happening on the pollution. Luckily, they don't have to make any decisions on whether or not this goes through. They are being held by the government. The habitat regulations, where we have explained to this committee on numerous occasions that this council is in charge of the habitat regulations, are not altered, and we are still in charge. We have not, up until this point, actually used that position to improve the position of Somerset, and this for me is an opportunity to do so. So we're going to cut the 106 planning time. We're going to make the paperwork easier. We're going to have one figure for the mitigation for every house in Somerset, so that the collection will be considerably quicker and easier. We will have a management system looking at the levels and moors with the EDPs. There is a lot of work to be done on that, and I wish to actually make our working group part of the way we look at the management of the levels and moors. That may take some negotiation later on. Before I take questions, I'm going to ask James Duval to talk about the work that his team are already doing on the EDPs and to explain more to this committee about what they are able or likely to be able to do. James.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know how much I could actually add to it, and it was very much sort of my comments would be mirroring my executive director's comments that we are exploring. We're trying to understand what the EDPs are actually going to mean for us and for Somerset. So planning colleagues as well as environmental colleagues are actually, I know, in a webinar right now with Adept and Natural England, listening to more information coming forward about the EDPs, the environmental delivery plans, and what that could actually mean for us, linking in with the natural investment zones. And again, what does that mean for us? There's a lot of other things, as you've mentioned, isn't there, around the landscape recovery projects. You know, we've got Greater Sedgemoor, which is a business case and an action on the tracker, and how we can utilise some of the work related to, you know, nutrient neutrality in that scheme, and what the long-term opportunities are for that programme coming forward. Just one bit of additional clarification with the national landscapes. It wasn't an application, it was a submission, an access for a request of clarity of whether we could apply for designation. The information which come back from Natural England was there was no new designations would go forward at this present time. So that was basically where the no in terms of a designation process for national landscape status at the levels and more. So that was that particular area. It's a complicated environment at this moment in time. The team are really just trying to understand what the options are on the table, but it really then is about, you know, that once we've gathered the information with our planning colleagues, it is that directive coming from executive and the governance around how we move forward. I have mentioned before with other work streams is we will have the local nature recovery strategy, which could actually help as a mechanism to move forward some of the work streams in this particular area as well. So no amazing clarity, sorry, Chair, but I would say as we speak, we have a lot of officers right now trying to find out more information.
James, could you please explain to the committee what an EDP is, when they're likely to be put in place, who is actually clearing them, and when this consultation ends?
If I'm honest, Chair, that is part of the clarity still. There is, you know, it's understanding the scope and remit and what that really means for us. It is limited information which has come forward. What I could do, Chair, is ask my officers to work with Kate from planning to come up with a briefing paper for the committee, so there's an information document and report, if that makes sense.
Thank you, James. This change will come into effect in April this year. The government will decide where the EDPs are. They will at the moment be managed by Natural England. Nod your head again, James. And will be in effect from November 26. All of which means that there's a slight delay, but that is not, in my opinion, important at this point in time. I am personally concerned that Natural England are being asked to manage them. I don't necessarily think they have either the data or the knowledge of the levels, unlike WAG or the RSPB, who have got in a 20 million, as we heard at our last meeting or the meeting before, in place to improve two of the moors. And there may be that we need to have multi organisations looking at where we can go forward with these EDPs. Chris, I may have said too much, but I'll now hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a little bit to add. So the precautionary factor that Mr. Orr mentions is a particular frustration. So not only are we, as planning authority, being asked to ensure that development meets 100% of nutrient mitigation, but there's an additional 20% added on top of that. So that is a real frustration, and it is adding to the burden for developers under the current arrangements. Councillor Rigby is the lead member for this area, and I met with Natural England and asked them to review their position on the precautionary factor. And after that conversation, they then wrote to us and unfortunately declined to do so. So I wouldn't want the committee thinking that we aren't otherwise trying to challenge some of the assumptions already baked in to the nutrient mitigation arrangements. In terms of time frame and cost, I think that is, as we've pointed out, one of the things that we are concerned about. So ultimately, this could lead to a much more streamlined approach for developers if they had a single levy that's applied across Somerset. And it helps to deal with not only mitigation but reinstatement. That in theory could make things much smoother for developers going forward, but we need to understand that. We also need to understand the element of cost. So if developers are no longer simply being asked to mitigate for nutrient neutrality but actually contribute towards reinstatement, that is a broader cost or package of works. However, there is an element of economy of scale. So at the moment, developers are either undertaking their own on-site mitigation, off-site mitigation, or they're buying credits, and those are individual packages of work rather than a more strategic approach. So there is the opportunity for this to have a better financial I was about to say impact, to cost less overall as a more strategic approach, but we don't know. In terms of consultation, according to online sources at least, is due to commence 28 days after the draft was published. The draft was published on the 19th of December. So assuming that is still the correct profile, consultation would commence. It's not a 28-day consultation, that's when it commences. So at the moment, there is a limit as to what we know. I am engaged with Councillor Rigby, as again the lead member here, to understand what that might mean for our approach as a council and what that might mean in terms of recommendations within a report. And we will be meeting with Natural England to understand the process in greater detail.
Thank you, Chris. Right, do I have any questions from the committee? Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I applaud the good work and wish that it could go faster. The consultation period starts in a few days. And how long is the consultation for, Chris? Do we know?
At this stage, I do not, I'm afraid. No, bear with me. I'll see if I can find it.
Okay, thank you. Because we do need to get on with this. The delays are inordinate and they are very, very expensive for developers, landowners, and the people that want to buy new homes in our area. We'll have, I think, potential problems where developers will say, but there's the mitigation has already happened. This is where the EDPs come in, I think. So we have to be very, very careful because there's likely to be challenges. But we need to get on with this It has been far too long already. We can't hold back any longer unnecessarily. We need to get everything moving properly and quickly. So I support all the work that's being done, but would urge everybody to go faster and further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Anybody else wish to?
I just feel I should make a comment. I mean, clearly for most of us, this is sort of new today, so I certainly don't feel well informed on what's coming forward here. But I would like to comment that what I'm hearing does sound like a much better approach. Clearly, the nutrient neutrality approach had up today has questionable benefits, very complicated, caused lots of problems. This sounds like a better way forward with management plans actually looking at improving the situation, addressing the problems. So, and you know that is what others are saying. So I thought I should just support that. Clearly, as often, the detail is important and how these things are delivered, but it does look like this could head on to a better approach. So I'm pleased to hear that.
Anybody else? Thank you for that. I would like to make a small recommendation that we ask the lead member, Mike Rigby, and Chris Hall to come back to this committee with the negotiation position as things move forward, so that we are kept informed of where this is going, and that we know before the April 26 exactly what the position is likely to be going forward.
Chair, I would propose that that document is circulated to all councillors.
And we'd like to please circulate the information to all councillors in a briefing paper, please. Right, can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Simon. Thank you, David. Anybody voting against? No, right, we're moving on. Welcome. We're going to look at the draft principles for parking. This paper has been given to you some time ago. I'm going to ask Richard Wilkins to introduce it, and then Micah Dyer-Jones to follow up on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So over recent months, we've listened carefully to the concerns raised previously by this committee, other members, and importantly, through the extensive public feedback gathered during the consultation, including businesses and other stakeholders. Feedback has been invaluable in helping us shape a balanced, transparent and evidence-based approach to parking across Somerset. In response, officers have developed a clear set of Somerset parking policy principles, supported by an implementation plan, which together set out how we intend to modernise and manage parking in a consistent and a future-focused way. These documents draw on our statutory responsibilities, align with our wider transport and placemaking objectives, and reflect what residents and stakeholders told us they need and expect. Today, we are asking the committee to consider and endorse these principles so that we can move forward with confidence in delivering a parking approach that supports both our communities and the wider Somerset economy. To support this work, we have also engaged specialist contractor Marston Holdings, whose expertise has helped us ensure the proposals are practical, enforceable, and in line with best practice. And at this point, Chair, could I hand over to Sarah Rogers, who will be taking you through the details of the principles and the planned implementation in more depth.
Thank you. Before we hand over to Sarah, Mike, do you want to say anything?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm very happy for Sarah to cover this item. Thank you.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello. 2 seconds. I'm trying to get it on. See it. That'll do. Yeah, that will fine. Okay. So the introduction to this presentation. This outlines Somerset Council's parking policy principles, providing the strategic context and rationale for managing on and off street parking, which is obviously the roads around Somerset and the car parks. That would welcome Scrutiny Committee's comments and endorsement on. It demonstrates how this approach aligns with the objectives of the local transport plan. Presentation also highlights key parking interventions, including tiered pricing, whole town community reviews, so that's carrying out surveys on each of the roads within those towns with parking restrictions, and car parks. And then the review of concessions and permits that currently Somerset issue, free parking or free car parks. So there's about 40 car parks that are currently free. So it's whether or not they'd be fit for purpose for introduction of charging, and future considerations along with proposed implementation approach, timescales and monitoring framework to ensure evidence-based and effective delivery. Any questions before I go ahead?
Can we please differentiate between the car parks in South Somerset, which aren't free, they're paid for by the parishes, and the actual free car parks in the rest of Somerset?
Okay, so basically what would happen is it's not a wide do-all. It's each person or each parish will be spoken to. It will be reviewing of what the use of the car park is. Doesn't mean that every single car park is going to be introduced into this. It is an investigation of phase by phase and each based on their own merits.
Anybody else got a question or a point?
Okay, so the local transport plan, so the council's objectives. So the objectives of Somerset Council's parking policy are designed to ensure that parking supports accessibility, local economic activity and community well-being while minimising congestion and environmental impacts. So based on the objectives for Somerset Council is sustainable first choice, encourage active travel, bus, park and ride and EV use. Great and healthy place to live, support communities, safe streets and town centre vitality. Reduce environmental impacts, so minimise car use, reduce carbon emissions and support green infrastructure. Reliable and resilient network, optimise traffic flow, prioritise essential trips and improve network efficiency. By aligning with the local transport plan, these objectives focus on promoting sustainable travel, creating safe and vibrant places to live, reducing carbon emissions and optimising traffic flow around the transport network. The policy provides a framework for evidence-based, proportionate interventions that balance the need of the drivers, residents and businesses and sustainable transport users. For the key parking interventions, the overview. This section provides an overview of the key parking interventions Somerset Council is proposing to manage parking efficiently and support wider transport objectives. These interventions include conduct a whole town and community parking reviews to optimise availability and reduce congestion, implementing tiered pricing to encourage turnover and sustainable travel into Somerset's towns, reviewing car park permits and concessions, introduce fees and charges into existing free car parks and rationalise pay and display infrastructure to transition to cashless parking where feasible. So the next following slides will tell you the methodology for each one of these interventions. The first one is a whole town and community parking reviews. Baseline surveys will be required of current on-street and off-street parking, where parking restrictions are currently located within a 10-minute walking radius, where there are currently free car parks and no on-street parking provisions. This exercise is to enable recommendation for changes with a view to optimising availability, reducing congestion and displacement, improving turnover, revising restriction, time limits and bay layouts. These identify areas for short-term and chargeable bays, permit zones or revised restrictions in areas of high demand. The methodology to deliver this is parking beat surveys will be undertaken across each town to capture parking occupancy for both on and off-street parking. With regards to on-street parking, surveys will be carried out over 3 days in each town, a weekday and weekends, at consistent times to provide a robust picture of curbside parking usage, demand and turnover. With regards to the off-street, all town centre car parks will be reviewed to record usage, capacity and length of stay. Vehicles will be logged using ANPR cameras on entry and exit over a 3-day survey period, enabling accurate assessment of parking behaviour. The collected data will be analysed and assessed, and a recommendation report will be provided on the way to deliver the way forward and how changes can be made to help the car parks and on street. Okay. So the next intervention is implementing tiered pricing to encourage turnover and sustainable travel. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Are you happy to do that?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, Dave first, followed by Andy.
Right, yes, thanks. I'm just trying to understand this a little bit better. The whole town and community parking reviews. It would help to know exactly what a beat survey is. It's not a term I'm familiar with. So if you could to describe that. Shall I put several questions, or do you want to do them one at a time?
So the beat survey is obviously in the methodology that I've just explained. So what it is that a kind of a rotation or a beat, as you like, someone will go in, record the usage of what's going on in these particular bays on the restriction, who's parking there at that time that they are present. And what
will that be done?
They record it on a handheld. So there can be, it depends, because Somerset's so big, it can be on an ANPR car. So what will happen is that
what will be recorded? It's just a car sitting in a space.
It's the vehicle registration that's recorded. Okay. So then what happens is that that's processed. 4 hours later, the car comes back, records that same journey again, so you can see if the car's moved, if the car stayed, which then can say that you've got long-term parking taking place in these roads, or you've got a visitor turnover. So you should be able to establish what kind of parking is taking place. Then what happens is you probably do a nighttime survey. So then you'll be able to see up to about 8 o'clock what else is taking place on those streets.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, that helps. And what parking is being reviewed here now? In our town and villages, parking's a big problem. There's a lack of it. It's an old area, built hundreds of years ago when the transportation was, horses and things like that. So it was never designed for modern levels of car ownership. So, people try to get by, but, no driveways, many hundreds of houses and the like. So where people park, it looks to me to be in 3 places. So there's the car parks, currently free in our area. We've got some on-street parking with restrictions, which obeys, and then probably maybe the majority who parking well is those who do have drives, newer houses and the like, but many others who are just parking on street where there's no parking restrictions at all. So are you covering all of those forms of parking?
It's basically looking at all the restrictions that are in place. That's yellow lines, double yellow lines, parking bays. Are they fit for purpose? Doesn't necessarily mean that changes are going to happen to every town, but it could be that a recommendation is, there's a length of 10 metres of single yellow line. Let's put that into a parking bay, because then that creates more parking. So until we actually go and have a look to see what's going on the roads, we can then come back with recommendations that support maybe allowing a little bit more curbside parking for residents.
Just probe on that a little bit. So are your beat surveys and any other surveys you're doing, are they covering let's forget about the people with their own driveways, but people who park on street where
All on
there's,
street. We don't do off street. We only
I
do on
finish.
street.
It may help. So, are you going to cover the on-street parking where there are no restrictions, no yellow lines, no bays? Because lots of people park there at the moment. You are going to cover those as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I just come in. We're particularly around the free car parks. We're looking at an area around them, so we're not going to capture the whole of an area, but we're going to look certainly at displacement and what might be displaced if we were going to perhaps consider introducing charges. So that would capture the main town area, if you like, but not probably the peripherals.
We tend to do a 10-minute walking radius. It's a phased approach because if you go out, most people would park and they'd walk 10 minutes if they have to charge. So we work it 10, 15, 20. But as a phased approach, we tend to go for a 10-minute walking distance from that free car park. So then we'd look to see what's going on the outside of the roads and what displacement could potentially take place.
Andy.
Chair, I'm going to hold my question until it's about free parking, and there's a whole slide on it, slide 11. So I'm going to hold until then. Thank you.
Carry on, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is implementing tiered pricing to encourage turnover and sustainable travel. A consistent tiered pricing structure can be applied based on location and occupancy. These tariffs will be supported by the survey data collected. The tariff structure will be designed to encourage turnover and promote sustainable travel. The table that's in here is an example table. Okay, so this is an example of what the tier charging could look like. So with the methodology for investigating this, we would, the appropriate tier for each car park will be determined through the whole town review. Data collected from the surveys will be used to analyse car park usage, including occupancy and the average length of stay. This information will then form the selection of the most suitable tier for each car park, ensuring pricing reflects demand, encourages turnover and supports sustainable travel. This approach simplifies the tariffs and aligns them with the role and function of each car park, makes the charging more consistent and fairer, reflecting the place topologies set out in the local transport plan. We also need to take into account the visitor economy, and they are likely to need a tier to reflect that, and also consider premium parking bays, i.e. longer or wider bays for larger vehicles, etc.
Yes, David.
Can I check how this will compare towns, especially shopping areas which are nearby to each other? The original proposals, if you read at them, it looked like there were going to be some towns with shopping areas which were going to have higher charges than in areas where new charging was going to be introduced, which might have encouraged people to go with the lower parking charges. So will that be sort of taken into account to make it fair between areas? And if I may just comment as well, the premium parking bays, I feel as though I'm in support of that. We're getting bigger cars, less efficient, more carbon emissions, taking up more space, less parking for others. And this is a trend we all know about in cars, which does cause problems, especially on narrow country lanes, where there's not the width of road either. I slightly wonder, though, how premium parking bays will work. That sort of implies anyone with a bigger car will have to go in the premium parking bay. And will they? Presumably, if they can still squash into a small space like they do at the moment, but difficulty opening their doors, they will continue to do that. I think I would incline towards having a higher charge for those people with the bigger cars, which cause the bigger problems. That's a suggestion.
So at the moment, there is something going through government. France have just brought it in, and it's the larger vehicles like the SUVs and that have got a higher premium. So wherever they park, they have that higher charge. But it's not something that we've brought in here yet. But what they have done is they've said in the meantime is within car parks, you could create those larger bays. And yes, you're right. It's whether or not they choose to park in them, but they would have a slight uplift compared to those normal bays. However, saying that, the size of the bays that there are now in the cars, some of them could be issued a PCM for being outside of the bay, especially for the fact that you've got those premium bays there. And then you've got transit vans where the axle's probably hanging over the bay. They could be issued for a PCM for outside of bay.
I think there are examples in the UK. I may have remembered it wrong. I have an idea Cardiff may have done it, and I think they do it on the registration numbers because the registration tells you the type of car. So I think that may be possible.
Sorry, can I just add Cardiff's actually under Wales, so it's not here, so we can't use the same government legislation as Wales.
Okay. Oh, well, that's a shame. I wonder how many English authorities are looking at it. You know, how different is the Welsh legislation actually different? I clearly, you may know better than me. But a way of doing that would be better. As I mentioned earlier, it strikes me the premium parking bays approach has drawbacks, clearly. It relies on people with bigger cars going into the premium bays. As I said, will they? A way to actually directly relate it in a simpler way so the car would seem a better way. But I'm happy to leave that there. The first question just about comparing areas and not adversely affecting some areas would be helpful.
Okay, so when we do the surveys, we'll be able to establish the use of that particular car park. And yes, the tiering may not, you might find that an A would be suitable for that car park outside that town, but in another town, tiered C might work. So it's not a one size fits all. It is the use of that car park, and we can obviously only establish that once we've carried out those ANPR surveys.
That's right. I'm still not clear. Can you tell us what is driving these charges? How are you going to set charges? I'm not understanding.
Go on, Richard or Bev. Turn your thing off, please, Bev.
To be clear, Dave, we need to do these surveys in order to get a picture of what the parking and what the situations in each town. Until we do that, we can't answer those sort of questions. Just to be clear, we have to adhere to UK government policy and not Welsh government policy. I think that would be correct. So the reason why we're bringing this is so that we can do the surveys, we can have the evidence to improve parking across Somerset. But without that evidence, we're kind of flying blind. And that was the message that I got loud and clear last time I was here, that the evidence needed to be collected. This will enable us to collect the evidence necessary for us to make informed decisions and base our, whatever we do will be based in the reality of that area and not presumptions from other areas that we've looked at. And it's really important that we do this work.
I'm coming in here, David. The fundamental argument here is that we had 4 district councils with 4 district parking things, and they're trying to make one parking policy for the whole of Somerset. All right? And without finding out what the differences are between your area and my area, they can't do that. And that's why they're looking to change everything.
That's not quite correct, Henry.
Go on and correct me.
We're very clear that different areas will have different needs and different different ways we need to approach parking. However, we do want a policy that will represent the whole of Somerset And this will enable us to pick up the information to be able to go forward. And I just wanted to make that clear that this is a way that we can get the information on every single area. So we can have specific understandings of each town and each parking area to see what is needed, and there is a huge amount of work that is needed. You identified in your area the problems that you have. There are problems in many towns across Somerset, and this will enable us to have the data, the raw data, to be able to produce a way forward that will bring in all the stakeholders and make sense for every town in Somerset.
Yes, David.
I'll just make a point. Thank you for that. What I was trying to avoid, the last proposals, when they came out, so Withlescombe has some shops. The charges last time would have made it more expensive to park in Withlescombe for shoppers than if you'd went to Taunton or Wellington, where they were going to have lower charges for people shopping. And of course, supermarkets, it's free in the out of town. So that was the concern. That would what if I'm pretty sure I remember that correctly. It started quite a long time ago now, but the way the charging tiers were proposed last time, it would have made it more expensive to park in a small town. So I just hope that won't emerge. I'm happy for you to continue with your studies. I'm not trying to question those. I was just trying to ensure fairness in what came out, which some of us didn't see previously.
To be clear, through you, Chair, to be clear, that was never the case. But this enables us to get the evidence, get the data, and make an informed decision.
Thank you. I'm moving on. So
Yeah, I was just going to add, the surveys will identify as well those areas that we need to provide short-term parking for. So if identifying the demand will really help us make sure there is provision, there is proper provision for that, which will then be reflected in the charging to make sure we're encouraging that short-term turnover to get those people into the shops, as opposed to them being clogged up all day with, for example, people that are just residents or working in those businesses. So it's identifying those areas as well, and making some provision for short stay parking.
thank you, Alan.
Very complicated to sort out, I think, to be perfectly honest. And I think whatever happens, you must make it clear to people exactly what is happening, in particular councillors, to make you all laugh. Now, I visited Porlock Weir about 5 days before Christmas. There's 4 car parks at Porlock Weir. You might all aware of this. Three are run by the county council, and one's privately done at right down the end at Porlock Weir. I didn't see any notice or anything else. I pulled in there and I paid the fine, and that's all there is to it. I did challenge it. So it's you must be very clear, because it sounds to me as if it could well be very, very complicated. Complicated things doesn't suit me, doesn't suit the average person.
Thank you, Alan. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very, very minor point. You spoke about increased sizing of a bay and therefore the charging for it. Now, as somebody who's disabled and frequently uses a disabled bay, which is slightly larger, no, the disabled bays are slightly larger because they have the hatching to allow doors to open for easier access. My question is, the standard, if my memory serves me well from being a portfolio holder many years ago, the standard bay was 2.5 metres by 5 metres. Now, if you are going to alter that, I had thought that 2.5 by 5 was a statutory legal requirement under English law. So if we're going to change it, does that mean you'd have to have an Act of Parliament to charge extra for, let's say, a 3 by 6 metre bay?
No, so that's where the changes have come in with government on doing these premium bays, because they've not made this blanket that they can't enforce or charge for larger vehicles, more so if they were like a 3.5. the big cars. With regards to disabled bays in car parks are actually 6 by 6 meters with the hatching including, and it wouldn't be anything that would encroach you as a disabled driver. And the bays themselves, the absolute minimum is 2.4 by 5 meters with a 6 meter carriageway. So most averaging now, vehicles are 2.4.5 to 2.5 meters wide, especially the larger vehicles. So the car park designs that currently within most councils are not sufficient, but they remain at the 2.4 until legislation changes, because it's essentially removing parking bays outside of the car park, which then has an issue with income and revenue for that particular car park, but it's not user friendly.
Thank you, Andy Dingwell.
Chair, before I ask a question, I just wanted to check in on what the level of debate we're supposed to be having here for this paper is. It feels like the conversation at the moment is very, very in the weeds, and I think having looked at the recommendations of the paper, we're actually asking at quite an abstract level. So in the interests of time, and for myself, I've already cleared with Jamie, I have to leave in a few minutes. I won't reach the end of this debate, but if any of us are ever going to reach the end of this debate, we're still on the first real substantive slide. So whilst I might have questions about the morality maybe of premium parking bays, I don't know if that's an appropriate time to be having this part of the conversation. Can I get clarity, please?
I actually understand exactly what you're saying, and I don't have a problem in restricting, if this committee wants it restricted, to looking at the strategic as opposed to the tactical. Is there anybody who has a problem with me enforcing that from now?
Again, I don't know what that means. So
it means that we don't talk about our own divisions, and we are talking about the whole of Somerset, and we are talking not about having premium parking bays. We are talking about how the actual strategy of this paper is taken forward, as per the recommendations at the end.
If I might, Chair, just to clarify further, it would be more the concept of tiered pricing as an idea rather than how that tiered pricing is executed in reality. So we would be saying as a scrutiny committee to these guys here, we accept the concept of tiered pricing, please go away, find that out, bring that back to us, and we'll look at the tactics later.
Yep.
The paper talked about premium parking bays. It wasn't me. It got introduced by them, and I finished my debate. Now, look, this is important. I don't know you want to restrict the debate. This is a scrutiny committee when we are meant to be going into the detail of this. Now, I don't know what you mean by the comment you just made, Henry, but I want to scrutinise this paper on the detail we've got. This is the first chance we've had to do this. Despite what was said earlier, this paper got circulated yesterday. It was late. It should have been a week in advance. We got it yesterday sent to us. I think we're wasting time by having this debate. I would rather just get on and scrutinise the paper, and I think you will find that less time. Now, I have got things I want to say, but also there's been no discussion with us locally. It's been talked about, well, when? It's been commented when? You very kindly turned up to our protest, but this paper proposes talking to people, and I'm interested to know when that happens, but it's not been done yet. This is our opportunity today, and I want to take it.
Chair, if I may, very quickly.
Yes,
sorry.
Mike, hold on, Andy.
I wonder if I might suggest that we let Sarah just run through the whole presentation and then take relevant questions, because I feel a lot of the questions may be answered just by hearing the presentation out, because we will go into the consultation process and the opportunity for local people to.
We will go forward on that basis. The questions end until we get to the recommendations at the end.
Chair, very sorry, just a minute, because I'm about to leave. I'm not storming out in any protest or anything like that. I have meetings I'm afraid I have to get to. So thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, so the rationalise of pay and display infrastructure and transition to cashless systems. Rationalising pay and display infrastructure and transitioning to cashless systems offers multiple benefits: cost efficiency, user convenience, flexibility, and data, streetscape and sustainability. So the methodology for delivering this would be analyse the last 3 years of pane display data for both cash and cashless transactions. Carry out a rationalisation analysis for each machine. The rationalisation process will be carried out in stages. Stage 1, low usage machines. Identify machines generating 0 up to an absolute minimum transaction amount per year. These sites will be reviewed and potentially recommended for removal. We will look at stage 2, we will look at machines that are coming to the end of their life cycle and identify what machines can be earmarked for removal. Stage 3, multiple machines in close proximity. Review areas where multiple machines exist to assess the scope for removal of one or more machines, using supporting signage to direct visitors to nearby alternatives. Review and ensure a consistent approach to concessions and season ticket charges. To carry out a review of existing permits and concessions to evaluate their current usage, effectiveness and relevance. The objective is to identify schemes that are underutilised or no longer necessary, simplify administration and ensure that remaining permits and concessions deliver clear value to both users and the authority. Streamlining these schemes will also improve transparency, reduce complexity and enable more efficient allocation of resource. So how we will deliver that is review the existing permit types and undertake over a period of 3 years, so the last 3 years worth of data. Evaluate what permit type can be discontinued. Review the permits concessions that are being purchased to see if there is a way to streamline the permits to reduce the number of permit types being issued, and then communicate any changes to key stakeholders. For the introduction of charges to free car parks. The introduction of charges will be evidence-based, grounded and robust data collection, which will be carried out during the initial surveys, such as usage statistics, proposed operational costs and overall financial sustainability. Proposals will be developed in consultation with local members and other key stakeholders to ensure transparency, gather input and build support. All proposals will be assessed against strategic objectives, including efficient resource allocation, fair use of services, and clear value for users. The formal review process will evaluate the potential impacts before implementation, ensuring that any changes introduced are fair, transparent, and supported by evidence, while minimizing disruption to service users. So the methodology for this is the review will begin with an analysis of the towns, which we're already going to be gathered, of the free car parks. Following this, discussions will be arranged with members, councillors and parish councillors to share the findings and identify which car parks could benefit from the introduction of fees. In developing proposals, the potential designs for these car parks considerations will also be given to preventing displacement parking. So again, that radius around any free car parks, to see whether or not there's a need for controls. Ensuring that any changes balance revenue generation with accessibility and minimal disruption to the surrounding areas. So this here, it gives the outline of delivery and what we plan to do. So this slide outlines the proposed approach for delivering all key parking interventions across Somerset. The methodology ensures that changes are aligned with Somerset Council's strategic objectives, comply with relevant government legislation and are evidence-based. Each stage of the process, from initial data capture through to implementation, has been designed to balance optional efficiency, stakeholder engagement and user needs. By following this structured approach, the Council can deliver targeted, effective and sustainable parking solutions that support communities while optimising resources. So the first thing, this is obviously how we're going to do it, is whole town community parking review, capture baseline supply, demand and turnover. Recommendations, a tailored intervention which will be delivered in a report per town. Design of recommendation, which again, just going back to that comment, these reports can then be discussed with the relevant town members, parish, etc. design of recommendations, concept designs, layout, signage and operational details, implementation cost and financial implications. We then do an informal consultation of any design changes, which will engage members, residents and businesses. After that, we can review and update from these comments that we receive from residents, etc. And then we can refine the details and designs based on feedback. We then carry out the statutory consultation, which allows a 21-day consultation period, which follows statutory guidance. And then we have delegated sign-off. So confirm readiness for implementation. We then have the implementation stage, which is the lining, the signing, etc. The scheme monitoring. Once the agreed recommendations have been implemented, a monitoring period will commence. This will normally last for 6 months, allowing sufficient time for the scheme to become embedded and for stakeholders to adapt to the changes. During this period, the following will be monitored: parking occupancy turnover and levels of congestion following implementation, impacts of sustainable travel and local economy and accessibility, the need for any adjustments to optimise outcomes and ensure continued alignment with strategic objectives. Funding. Under the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, surplus income from on-street parking charges and all penalty charge notice is ring-fenced for transport-related purposes, and these funds are held in the parking reserve. Somerset Council has a parking reserve made up of this income for the last few years, and that has been set aside to cover any future costs associated with parking operations. This survey work will be funded from this parking revenue. So the recommendations that we obviously have brought here to scrutiny is to agree and support whole town and community parking reviews to assist with optimising availability and reduce congestion, implementing a tiered pricing within the car parks to engage turnover and sustainable travel, review car park permits and concession. So understand the introduction of fees and charges into existing car parks, and then rationalise pay and display infrastructure to transition to cashless parking where feasible.
Thank you very much. There are 2 timelines in here that I've picked up and I'm willing to be corrected. The first is you're going to monitor things over 3 years. And the second is you're looking at a 6-month monitoring period on a separate item. How and what's the timeline for rolling this out? So are you going to start in South Somerset? Are you going to start in Taunton Deane? When do you expect each area to be finished? And when will you bring back that report on the area to this committee?
Okay, so what happens is that currently within Somerset, we or the traffic orders are currently split out into their geographical locations, so north, east, south, and west. So the idea is, and the most efficient is to break it up into those 4 quarters. So we start with the north, carry out those as soon as we get agreement. We can then start those surveys and have those recommendation reports back with the committee. Fair timeline, I would probably say it'd be 2 months to have that first report back, which will then allow us to carry out the surveys, draft that recommendation report, and then have that back.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very good report. Questions, David?
Thanks. I am definitely trying to, keep this to the general, but we are obviously all informed by our patches. We cannot be. That's where our experience is. Now, in my area, the big concern is about charges in free car parks. One of the reasons is, and this does not seem to be mentioned here, and I feel it needs to be, is that our car parks that I'm talking about, I think it helps to identify them just so you can understand as well. So Milverton and Witherscombe, they're used to a very large and significant extent for residential parking. And that is the big concern, and that's not covered here. This is part of why it's generated so much upset, and we've got lots of problems with parking in our area, and we're really keen to talk to you and share what we know and see in our areas. And I'm really keen to see that it's included in the guidelines, and I don't think it is at the moment. So hearing a little bit more from what you think about residential parking and being allowed, and I should also mention some of the residential parking is by people really low incomes. Around our town centre, we have really small flats where people go because they don't cost a lot for rent. If they have a car, and all of them well do, they won't be able to afford a lot for their cars. And those people feel really threatened by the idea of having to pay hundreds of pounds to suddenly park in the free car parks. And I think it's a genuine concern. And so I would like to know, and the other concern is the displacement parking, and it's linked to it. I think, let's just finish. I know you're going to answer it, and I really look for, and I will listen, pay a lot of attention to how you reply. But just the other dimension to this is the displacement parking that occurs. People will want to avoid paying hundreds of pounds of park charges. They might go to quite some efforts to avoid that. The trouble is, old town, more housing coming in, high levels of car ownership already at the moment. There's cars parked all over the place, all over town, causing problems. We have parking on double yellow lines more or less, throughout the day, because that's where people go in Shires, especially in the town centre. And the concern is that people are going to be displaced out of the car parks into other areas, adding to these problems, and have not had a sense that that's been understood. It was never covered in the environmental impact assessment, things like this. So I really wish to know, residential parking, displaced parking, what are your views? How are you going to handle this? And I think residential parking needs to be mentioned in there, but we come to that.
Yes, Richard.
I'll come straight in and say, without collecting the data, we have no idea exactly how many residents are parking and where. This is what this is about. This is why we're doing this. It is so important, and you pick up on some huge problems that Wiveliscombe and Milverton have in regarding to parking. And the idea is that we solve these issues with the data we get and with the tools we have, potentially. But, until we have the data, we don't know what we're going to do, because that's what we need. And it's, you can't tell me how many of your residents exactly use a particular car park at a particular time. This will enable us to have a very good idea. So I really do hope that you will be able to support the recommendations here, because the problems that you're pointing out are the ones we are trying to solve. And like I say, without the data, we cannot have a clear idea. And you've already explained that it's very difficult when people are parking across double yellow lines. But when we collect that data, we could have a better understanding. I don't know whether you want to add to that, Bev, or disagree with me in any way. I don't know.
Absolutely agree, Richard. It's about us collecting the data so that we can make those informed choices. And for example, in Wiveliscombe, actually knowing how much of the car park is used by residents, how much of it does get turned over by people visiting the town, will be really useful information for us to then consider actually how we might support that going forward. So it's really important that we need to understand the data. Before
I'm happy with that. Can I just the points, it won't take far, but I'm happy with that. Sorry, and I've left my mic and I've just noticed. Thank you. That's helpful, and that's part of the reassurance. We've been seeking patch for a year or so, and this has caused large elements because it hasn't felt like we've been heard, and we've been sitting waiting. Look, but you're hearing now. I'm happy with what you just said, Richard. So I'm not okay. Now, the timing, Henry touched on it a little bit. you know, we've been made various things about when we're going to have local meetings, but we've not yet been invited to a local meeting. And can you give an indication on the timing of when this is going to happen? And we're really keen to talk to you locally and have this opportunity. And you're reassuring me by some of what you're just saying. So can you outline the timing of when you will be meeting with the local councillors, as you've said you're going to, and when the results of that will follow? And my very last point, for the recommendations for scrutiny, I would like to add to the first bullet point, so whole town and community parking reviews to assist with optimising availability and reducing congestion, what it's got at the moment, plus take account of the need for residential parking. Could that be added there? Because at the moment, that's not been mentioned in the report at all. And for our area, it is important. And I'm sure others as well, but I can only speak for my area.
No problem. We will add that. I've had the nod, Richard. You don't need to speak on it.
Timing?
Can you turn your thing off? Thank you, David. I just want to make one thing absolutely clear, and they are said it to you that they are going to talk to your local communities. You need to go back to Wiveliscombe and say to them that the council will want to address their town councils. They may want a public meeting so that the actual meeting is for the whole community, not just the town councillors. That's what we had in Castle Carey when we had this discussion, and it produced a result. And it needs your community under your leadership to be actually working with these guys to take it forward. And sorry to lecture you, but I was in charge of this in South Somerset, and I had exactly the problems you're talking about, and we dealt with it at a local level, each community.
That's fine. When's it going to be happening? We were told the charge is going to start in October. We were told we were going to have a meeting before Christmas. None of what we've been told has yet happened. I'm just asking, when will it happen? And I think a meeting with I take your point, Henry, but I think when the meeting with the local councillors, it will happen, because the previous ones haven't happened.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion here, Richard. You come back, your team, on February the 18th, just listen, with a timeline. So you're actually saying that gives you nearly a month to actually say, we're going into this area, bang, and we're going into that area, bang. Why are you not shaking your head?
No, I'm not going to do that. We're going to get this right. We're absolutely going to get this right. And I'm not going to give you a timeline. You will get the timeline is that you will have, it is set out very clearly in the process, and that's your timeline. It's very clear that there will be consultation. The timeline is set out there, but I'm not going to give you a date to when we start and when we finish, because we have to get this right. We have to get the timing right. There'll be plenty of time. You won't be, it won't be brushed under the carpet, but I can't say on, October the 31st or whatever, we will be there, because we need to get this right, and we need the data, and we need it, and we need to go on. And I really, really am upset with your accusation that I haven't come to you guys and spoken to you, because I've done that several times. I came to your I came to Wiveliscombe especially to speak to the people, and it was quite clear that when I spoke to people that yes, there's anxiety. Of course, there's anxiety when you bring something new. But it was interesting that I had a range of thoughts that were brought to me from various different people, and we have to consider them all. This will enable us to do that. It will come in time. I'm not going to give you a date, because we need to get this right.
Okay. Yes, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. As lead member for finance, I think it's only fair to say that there will need to be a decision made, because there will be a cost to doing this work, and that decision will be made by whatever is the correct place, and I think it's already on the forward plan, so it'll either be by executive or a key decision or a non-key decision. And if it's at executive, executive will be looking for feedback from this scrutiny committee. And until that decision is made, nobody can work on any timeline at all. So I think what's happening today is really important, because that feedback for the decision maker, whether it's executive, lead member or officer, is really important. And that is the start point for this revised timeline. And I personally very much welcome the fact that we're back here today, seeing this presentation with what I believe to be the right approach to what is a very challenging position post local government reorganisation.
Thank you, Liz. Right, any other questions? Sorry, I got Simon Cole next.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question. You indicate that the funding, if I understood the timeline of the programme, you're looking at the last 3 years' data, and then you are starting a process which looks at all of the car parks in rotation, obviously east, west, north, and south, and that all that funding is being, all that work is being funded by the parking reserve. I'd like to know what the parking reserve is currently, and what you anticipate the cost of this work to be, because I think that's quite important for local people to understand the costs involved. But I welcome the thrust of the argument, welcome the source of getting the right data, because I think it's a really, really important part of the process. Thank you. If I could have those answered.
We're currently waiting for the final quote for the work. We do have an estimated cost, but I'll leave that, I think, for the moment until we've got a final cost. And I need to get clarification from finance, the exact figure of what is in the parking reserve. I had initial conversations with them. We will need approval from our finance colleagues before we are able to give the go-ahead. We will have all that in place for the executive meeting on the, I think it's the 3rd of March, where this is on the forward plan.
Through you, that's not particularly satisfactory. If we're going to recommend a course of action with an unknown cost attached to it, I'm not particularly comfortable with that.
Okay, I've got the message. You can show that in your vote. Rob Reed.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as an overview, I think finding information so that we can come to an informed decision later on is a very good thing, and I welcome this coming forward. I do have a couple of questions on it though. Going on, the parking reserve was my main question. Is there enough in there to pay it? Will you have answered that, or haven't answered it, or to the point? And just as a question, if there is any excess from the parking reserve, is it legal to move that to an active travel route? Okay, and my second question is, will this exercise delay the application of one of my parish councils to purchase a car park, which has been in the system for, well, ever since this unitary council was informed? We're still waiting for an answer from the council, to be honest. Do we know anything? Does anybody know anything about purchasing this car park? Thank you.
Yes, Liz.
Thank you. Councillor Reid is very welcome to email both me and Councillor Butt Phillip, because we're dealing with devolution and we can check where that is with the asset management group. So please just email us direct. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Next on my list is Mandy Chilcott online.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report. Just a few questions, if I may. I'm trying to understand, and I've looked in the report, we're talking about car parking on street. There isn't mention from what I can see around overnight. And also, for me, if you're looking at a whole car parking review, it would need to include, for example, requests for residence parking. I know there's been a number in my area where those requests have gone in. The second thing was we had quite a lot of work done locally in Minehead and Dunster around a parking review. It was a very, very intensive piece of work, very labour intensive, and what I'm trying to understand is what capacity do we have, because that capacity officer wise will dictate the speed. And the last part of that question is it going to be an overall review of all of the parking on street, off street, residence parking, or are we just looking at those areas really that this initial piece of work started with? So if you could just answer those, that would be really helpful. Oh, and last point is, we're seasonal here, so the parking patterns at this time of year will be very different to what you might see in August, and has that been factored in? Thank you.
You going, Bev?
Yeah, I think so. So thank you, Mandy. Yes, so it will be an overall a review of all the parking, both on and off street. We've already identified around the seasonal element as well, and the fact that whilst we can get the initial bit of data, we're going to have to look at actually how we apply, how that works, you know, during the summer and the winter period. So we might need to extend those types of surveys. We are, with regards to capacity, we've engaged with Sarah through Marsden Holdings to support us to try and be able to move this forward at speed, because we don't have the officer capacity in-house to do this very quickly at all. Sarah and her team have done this type of work all around the country and can draw on lots of examples of where things have worked and where things haven't worked, which are going to be really useful for us as we start to understand the data and we start to bring forward the recommendations as a result of that.
Chair, could I just follow up with a further question? Thank you. Just to say two things. Firstly, the thought of the tiered charging worries the life out of me. We're a seasonal area, absolutely dependent on tourism, and some charges are already a deterrent, so I would not want to see them go much higher. We need our visitors. And the last thing, we had a question earlier about timescales and when we were going to do each area. Whilst I understand the challenge with that, I think it'd be really helpful for us to have an order roughly of which areas are going to be done, because then you will know if they're working on an area, you know yours is the next, you'll sort of know what's coming and where you are in that order of works. And I think that's not giving an exact timescale, but it might be helpful to pre-warn councillors that their area is likely to be looked at quite soon.
Thank you, Mandy. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. A statement for general consumption, I think, rather than a question. That is, the point came up earlier about finance from a couple of people. And it's worth noting, I think, and somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, that money that's collected from car parking fees can only be used for highways. I don't know what the statement would be, highways type thingies. So when people say to us, people that we come across every day say, why are we always getting charged for car parking? It should be free, because it goes towards paying for other highways related things. And it's worth, I think, us all, well, not us, because we know this, but people that see us online or no doubt will end up in the paper tomorrow, that this is what goes towards funding this stuff. And I think it's something worth noting. Is that right?
Bev, I'm going to come back in myself a minute. If you read the funding bit in front of you, it absolutely says on-street parking is the restriction, not the car parking funds. The car parking funds pay for the maintenance and the fact that we own that land, either we've leased it or we own it, and we need a return on it. Now, that is not restricted in the same way and normally produces excess funds as well. Sorry to be a know-all. But at the end of the day, that's the actual way it is. Now, the fundamental question for me is, does your high street need car parking to get people in to use it? And one of the major problems with the whole system, and at the moment I'm having a fight in Castle Carey about people wanting residence parking, where it is absolutely going to destroy the parking that is used for the high street, the 2-hour on-street parking. And that is one of the things we're going to have to bring up. If you want more of an answer, I'll ask both to come in, but go on.
You, Chair, said that we weren't allowed to talk about our own divisions.
Was just giving you an example.
But it was a general statement regarding parking fees.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you said. You're quite right.
Okay, I'm going now to take the recommendations. Go on, Steve.
One thing is on scope, but it's not localised at all. You say reducing, optimising availability and reducing congestion. Is that reducing congestion on the roads or reducing congestion in the car park?
It's a bit of both, on and off. So if you've got people that are sort of staying there all day, and there's no turnover, it means you might have congestion where people are literally circling the roads trying to find a parking space. So it's based on that.
It's a bit of both. Right, thank you.
Okay. What is the wording you've accepted on the first recommendation to be added for David? Sorry, I never took a note.
To do with the residents. So it was the recommendation for the survey, but then to take note of the residents.
And David?
Yeah, the need to take into account residential parking.
Okay, and you're happy with that? Can you add that, please? Right, having said that, the other ones are the same. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? I fully understand Simon's point about the payment for it. I personally believe that we need to bring the timelines and the money, if you're doing it on the 3rd of March, back to this committee so that we understand what is happening prior to the budget. Is that accepted by everybody? Yes, go on, Sarah.
With regards to pricing, some of them might be a little bit indicative because we don't know the outcomes.
About things being indicative, but it's better that we have some knowledge than no knowledge. Can I have a proposer? And thank you, Steve, for proposing. Matt is seconding. Can I have votes in favour of the recommendations as laid out, please? You abstaining or voting against? No problem. We've got one abstention and everybody else is voting for. Thank you. Now let's move on. Items for information, please. Jamie, are you doing that one?
There aren't any.
There are no items of information. Great. Forward plan. Anybody got any changes to the forward plan they want to bring up? Dave first, followed by Rob, followed by me. Thank you very much for your attendance and where it's gone.
And I've crashed my mod.gov, but I can remember the point I was going to make. Yeah, and sorry, it's a broken record really, but it's just the points again on the climate reports, and there's 3 or 4 of them to do with partnerships, green finance, the business plan, and I'm sure there's another one as well. I did look back yesterday. They've been on our forward plan since December 2024, and I, for one, have been saying I'm really keen to see these and look forward to them. You know, start with a bit of enthusiasm. Can we finally get some dates for when these reports are going to come to us? We've been waiting more than a year now when officers offered them to us, but they're not coming. And for me, these are really important reports I want to hear and contribute to. So please, can we have some dates for them?
Mike, would you like to come back on that one? Is it yours or somebody else's?
if I may, Chair, I think we probably need to pick this up as part of the agenda setting process for the next meeting and the next cycle.
No problem, noted, David, but that's all I can do at this point. Yes, Rob.
Yes, Chair, just going on from the debate we had at that last scrutiny meeting about footpaths and rights of way. We had quite a talk about it. And the officer suggested we had some of the footpath officers come and talk to us about why there is such a problem in fixing the footpath problems, because as anybody who's been on the footpath site, the Somerset Council footpath site, can see there's an awful lot of obstructions and problems and so on. So I think it would be quite helpful, please, Chair, to bring that forward.
Has been promised to me by Mike when it will come. Let me just ask him to answer.
Yeah, again, I think it's a matter to pick up in the agenda setting to find out. We have agreed, absolutely. We will have an item on that. I think what I said last time was we need to put a little bit of definition around specifically what within the rights of way realm people want to talk about. So because it's huge, you know, the remit. So if we could perhaps have some suggestions for the specific remit, and then we can timetable that.
Bob, if you send an email to Martin, myself and Aisha for the agenda setting of what you actually want to talk about, because Mike is very worried me getting into the legal position on rights of way. I would like one other thing added, Aisha, which is the work group now needs to meet on the water, because the new information needs to be brought forward. It needs to be addressed by James Deval and probably Chris and probably the gentleman who's writing the report on the phosphates. Thank you. Anything else? Right, I'm going to declare the meeting closed. Thank you for attending.